A truly frightening and miraculous thing happened to Yi Wuchen. After he had swallowed the entire river of swords, his body emanated an incredible amount of sword will. Beams of light shone into the vast universe, and his entire body glowed brilliantly as if he was in a dreamlike domain of swordsmanship. He shut his eyes tightly, and wisps of sword will continued to flow through his body. The piercing sounds of a sword's blade could be heard coming from within his body as if he was purifying and training it. He actually managed to swallow it successfully. Everyone's eyes were on Yi Wuchen. When they saw that his body had not been destroyed, they knew that he would probably succeed in swallowing the entire nebula, inheriting the sword will the nebula contained. This nebula was very likely to have been left behind from Ziwei the Great's period of cultivation. By swallowing it, Yi Wuchen could reap really tremendous rewards. Wong! An unbelievable amount of sword will exploded, causing the clothes of many to move and flap from the sheer force of the explosion. The illusion of a divine sword appeared on Yi Futian's body, and it looked like the divine sword that they had seen within the nebula. This divine sword wasn't an actual physical sword but an illusion, so it flickered from time to time. But it exuded a tremendous amount of sword will and seemed to be formed by a terrifying sword chi. It seeped bit by bit into Yi Wuchen's body, resonating with the swordsmanship within him and merging with his body. Boom! Just then, an extremely powerful sword cultivator appeared to walk in the emptiness. This sword cultivator was a powerful level 7 Renhuang, and his eyes possessed tremendous sword might. He descended and landed above Yi Wuchen. An incredible amount of sword will flowed over his body. He pointed at Yi Wuchen. He launched an attack on Yi Wuchen without holding back at all. 9 divine swords came down from the void. Blind Tai and the rest wanted to help, and Yi Futian frowned as well, but he didn't go forward to help and even stopped Blind Tai, Fangari, and the rest from going forward. They watched as the terrifying divine swords came down in an instant, carrying an equally terrifying mightiness as they made their way towards Yi Wuchen to kill him. But a shocking amount of sword chi burst out from Yi Wuchen's body. His own body did not release this, but it came from the incredible sword hidden within the giant sword that he had swallowed. This shattered the sword will that came towards him. That sword will is really powerful. Everyone watching felt their hearts tremble and palpitate. Yi Wuchen's level of cultivation was way too low, so there was no way he could have released such a shocking amount of sword might. But the sword will he had swallowed turned out to be powerful enough to defend him against that attack. This made the expression of the sword cultivator from the void turn nasty, as if he could only watch as Yi Wuchen swallow up all of that energy and inherit the sword might hidden within the nebula. He doesn't have the right to control and swallow this sword cloud and inherit the energy within it all. A voice suddenly spoke up. The one who spoke was a middle-aged man in a black robe who carried an extremely wide and large sword. His jet black hair flew wildly in the space, and his eyes were deep and equally black. He looked down at where Yi Wuchen was with folded arms. Anyone in this place was extraordinary. They were perfect cultivators of the great path from top-tier factions of power. This man was no different. He did not come from the divine prefecture, but he was a powerful sword cultivator from the dark world. He was practically invincible now and was a level 8 cultivator in swordsmanship. He was only one level away from the peak of his abilities. Over the past number of days, he had been trying to comprehend and trying to think of a way to obtain the power of this nebula. He had tried several different methods, but he never thought that the person who would eventually swallow the nebula would turn out to be a mid-level Renhuang sword cultivator. Yi Wuchen was considered one of the weaker sword cultivators among the people gathered here. Most of the other cultivators were stronger than him. If you have the right to, then why didn't you get any of it? Yi Futian looked at the other party and asked him. The sword cultivator in black glanced at Yi Futian. His jet black eyes contained a tinge of ruthlessness, and it made him seem very dangerous. So I'm going to kill him and try again to see if I can get it. The sword cultivator in black unsheathed the sword he was carrying. It was a huge black sword that emanated a frightening aura of death around it. The moment he held the giant sword in his hand, a terrifying aura exploded from his body and put pressure on the rest of the people around him. Be careful, said Fangari in a low voice. He could sense that this man was a very powerful threat. Of course, Yi Futian had felt that too. He shifted slightly to stand in front of Yi Wuchen, while Fangari remained by his side to protect both of them. There were many powerful cultivators here, and Yi Wuchen was still in the midst of cultivating and absorbing that powerful nebula, so he needed someone to protect him throughout the process. Blind Tai floated up, and the illusion of an ancient god appeared behind him. He reached a palm out, and a giant divine hammer appeared in his hand. He gripped it hard, and a great path divine light flowed out. It contained a shocking amount of power. The man in a black robe raised his palm, and a frightening dark typhoon instantly appeared. The typhoon winds seemed as sharp as swords as it tore through the space and seemed terribly heavy. With a shift of his body and the raising of his hand, a terrifying dark sword chi appeared in the space instantly. When his sword came down, the frightening typhoon covered the entire place, while deep and terrifying dark cracks appeared in the space. The cracks kept moving forward, taking over the vast space and heading straight for where Yi Futian was. The crack in the middle, in particular, looked like a dark, venomous dragon as it carried sword light and tore through everything it touched. At the same time, Blind Tai made a move too. A majestic divine light encompassed the vast void. He swung the divine hammer in his hand wildly and raised both arms. The clothing on his arms began to tear as his muscles began to swell, and he was full of an incomparably wild and explosive power. Boom! An ear-deafening blast was heard as the raised divine hammer slammed against the space, instantly forming a terrifying screen of light that could fight against all attacks. Those black cracks of sword were immediately blasted to the sides, causing several cracks in the screen of light but failing to shatter it. Meanwhile, the divine hammer collided directly with the giant sword in the middle, and it seemed like the entire pace was going to explode and shatter as a terrifying storm surrounded them. Anyone who wasn't at least a high-level Ren Huang quickly retreated. That terrifying storm could tear through space, causing scary beams of light to appear in the sky. Eventually, Fangari unleashed a light screen in front of him to protect his side from suffering any residual impact. Several powerful Renhuangs felt the urge to fight as well. Most of the people left were sword cultivators, and they unleashed a barely visible sword will, which filled the space with suffocating pressure, which made everyone feel very uncomfortable. The divine light around Yi Wuchen's body remained just as bright. As that intense sword continued to seep into his body, the sword light from his body became even more brilliant and glorious. His swordsmanship aura kept becoming stronger, and he looked like he might even break through to the next level. When he saw all this happening, Yi Futian looked around at the others around him and said, "Everyone has come here to cultivate. If you've missed the chance here, there are opportunities in many other places, and you can all head elsewhere to continue your comprehension. Since someone has already taken this nebula, then I hope all of you can leave him alone." But his words didn't seem to have affected the others very much. The sword will that the other cultivators unleashed only became stronger, and several parties were unleashing astonishing amounts of sword might from all directions. They were all raring for a fight as they put pressure on where Yi Futian was. It was as if they were all waiting for one person to start fighting before they would all join in. After all, Fangari was protecting them, so it wouldn't be easy to get past him either. When he saw that everyone around him wasn't convinced, Yi Futian took a step forward. The great path divine light in his body began to surge, and his body seemed to be roaring. His eyes suddenly gleamed coldly, as if an icy moon had appeared within his pupils. His body suddenly became impossibly cold, and his frosty voice said, "If all of you insist on trying, then I'm afraid some of you might have come here for nothing." "Is that so?" A sharp voice rang out. Yi Futian looked up above to see a level 7 Renhuang from a top-tier faction of power in the divine prefecture wave his palm. Countless beams of gold light instantly burst from his body, and a horrifyingly sharp aura swept through the space as many reddish-gold divine swords appeared around his body. These reddish-gold divine swords were so many that they blotted out the sky, covering the entire space. All of them were pointed towards Yi Futian, and each sword was incredibly sharp as if they could cut through anything in the world. "You want to try?" said Yi Futian as he looked at the other party. "I'm going to try." The moment the other party finished speaking, he stepped into the void. In that instant, the reddish-gold divine light slashed right through the void, causing the brilliant gold sword light to hurtle downwards and cover the sky. At the same time, the innumerable number of divine swords came down. The sight was terrifying to behold. Wong. Everyone watched as Yi Futian didn't dodge the attack at all. Instead, he ran straight into that ultra-powerful array of reddish-gold divine swords as if he wasn't afraid of anything at all. The Renhuang who made the attack frowned. How was this man so audacious? Could anyone survive these divine swords? However, at the same time, Yi Futian's entire body glowed spectacularly in the midst of the divine swords as an astonishing amount of divine light burst forth from within his body. He seemed to have transformed on the spot and transformed into a divine sword that could reach the heavens. He was now a starry divine sword, and the divine light of the stars surrounded his body. He carried an impossibly sharp aura and a power to tear through space. Kaboom! Everywhere that the starry divine sword went, the reddish-gold divine swords broke and shattered. The starry divine sword was under an intensely aggressive attack as well, but it continued to slash through the reddish-gold swords and head towards the other party. The eyes of the attacker exploded with an alarming divine light. A divine wheel of the Great Path appeared in the sky as one giant reddish-gold divine sword tore through and clashed head-on with the starry divine sword that was coming its way. The two giant swords crashed into one another, creating a destructive storm that surged through the void and threatened to break everything apart. My flesh has become the way so my physical body will not perish. But aren't you afraid of dying if your divine will gets destroyed? A voice resonated in the void, and a thunderous blast rang out. The starry divine sword went forward regardless, and several crack lines appeared. But at the same time, the giant reddish-gold sword began to show cracks as well. This caused the other party to give a muffled groan as he immediately kept his sword away and retreated. A beam of sword light cut through the void, sending the other party flying out. The starry sword disappeared, and Yi Futian appeared in its stead. His gaze looked towards the other party, who had flown far out. I'll spare you this time. But if anyone tries to do anything again, I'll make sure you die. With that, he looked at everyone around him. A level 6 Renhuang had actually struck terror in everyone's heart. Chapter 22:15. Take it that we don't know each other. The entire place fell silent. All the Renhuangs were standing in different spots, but they were all staring intently at Yi Futian. None of the people here were simple or ordinary. But even so, Yi Futian remained as audacious as ever. Then again, it seemed like he did have the right to be. A level 6 perfect Great Path Renhuang had completely defeated an extremely powerful level 7 one. Everyone could feel that the sword cultivator's attack earlier had been really aggressive, and any other level 6 perfect Great Path Renhuang would probably have been killed by those divine swords. After all, the difference between each level was extremely great, especially since the sword cultivator was already a high-level Renhuang at level 7. But Yi Futian had become the attack itself and ran right past the swords from the other party, forcing the other party to use his divine wheel of the Great Path to block the attack, which caused cracks to appear in his divine wheel. Besides Yi Futian, Blind Tai's fighting abilities were extremely powerful as well. He was now engaged in a huge battle with the level 8 cultivator in black from the Dark World, and their fight had gone deep into the galaxy, which was a terrifying sight to behold. There was also Fangari, who was protecting Yi Wuchen. This combination of people made for a seriously strong team. Just then, Yi Wuchen emanated countless beams of sword light from his body, which shot into the starry skies. An astonishing sword chi completely covered his body as a galaxy of sword will entered his body. He broke through to the next level and reached level 5 Renhuang. Wong! The aggressive sword light burst into the sky, and Yi Wuchen opened his eyes. His entire body was glowing like an actual sword of the Great Path. He looked around him. Yi Futian looked down towards Yi Wuchen to see Yi Wuchen looking at him too. He nodded slightly and didn't say any words of thanks. Given their relationship, there was no need for all this formality. They didn't need to say anything for the other person to understand. He has already inherited the path, and it has been fully absorbed into his path, so it is really meaningless for all of you to continue fighting. Why waste time on this? Said Yi Futian in a loud voice. The other cultivators glanced at Yi Wuchen, then some immediately turned and left. It was true that this vast space was where Ziwei the Great had cultivated, But since Yi Wuchen had already swallowed the nebula, fully absorbed it, and broke through to the next level, there was no point in staying here. One after another, they left and gave up on continuing to fight. Even the sword cultivator who had been forced to retreat after attacking Yi Futian earlier had left. After the shocking sound of a collision was heard, Blind Tai was forced backward, while the other party had been sent flying to somewhere even higher. He threw a glance down at Blind Tai as his black robe flapped wildly and his black hair danced madly. "If there's a chance, I'll fight you again," he declared loudly before turning to walk away. Blind Tai couldn't see him, but he knew that the other man had walked away. He kept away his aggressive aura and said, "That man is mighty." Yi Futian had come over as well. He knew how powerful Blind Tai was since he had been able to fight Muyun Lan. Since that man in black had fought Blind Tai without obviously losing, he was certainly a very powerful fighter himself. The Divine Prefecture itself is already huge, and there are more worlds than that. Half of the best cultivators have appeared here, so it's not surprising that such powerful characters are here too. "There might even be some who are even more powerful around," replied Yi Futian. Blind Tai nodded. He understood that too. This place had gathered the top fighters of the entire world, not just the best of one domain. Yi Futian looked towards Yi Wuchen again and asked, "How are you feeling?" Yi Wuchen had swallowed the entire nebula, but Yi Futian didn't know how much he had gained out of doing that. The bit of sword will that Ziwei the Great left behind contains a sort of swordsmanship. Yi Wuchen looked at Yi Futian with a gleam in his eyes. He was rather excited inside as well. He had gained way more than a breakthrough in level this time. Yi Futian smiled and nodded. This had indeed been a wonderful opportunity. After all, not everyone had attained the powers of great emperors more than once like himself. The swordsmanship of the sword will that had been left behind from Ziwei the Great's cultivation was extremely valuable to a sword cultivator. "Come on, let's go to other places to have a look," said Yi Futian, and they all left the place. Since the nebula had already been swallowed up, this area no longer had anything of value, so nobody stuck around. They all continued walking around the galaxy to look for where the others had gone. Just then, they noticed that a fight had broken out in front. Yi Futian looked in the direction of the fight, and his brows immediately furrowed slightly. "Oh no!" Blind Tai exclaimed before suddenly breaking out into a run at breakneck speed. The rest of them also quickly headed to that area. Yi Futian flew through the sky and arrived at that area in just a few moments, while Blind Tai and Fangari had already gone over first. They immediately got into a fight and clashed fiercely with them, causing the entire galaxy to shake violently. Yi Futian increased his speed and came to where Fang Huan and Zi Feng were. The aura around Zi Feng trembled violently and seemed to be injured. But her entire body was covered in divine fire so that she could recover very quickly. Above him, Shi Kuei and Jiu Huai were standing in different places, but they were both facing powerful opponents. But of course, the one who had the most powerful cultivators surrounding him was Chen Yi. Several cultivators were standing around him, and they all possessed a terrifying aura. Some of them were even level 8 cultivators. The way they stood in this huge space had formed a tight circle around Chen Yi as if they were afraid that Chen Yi would escape again. Before this, Chen Yi had escaped, so they started attacking his companions to force him to return. When he saw this scene, Yi Futian knew that Chen Yi must have been the one who got into real trouble. Otherwise, the majority of the cultivators wouldn't be surrounding him now. "Take this." Yi Futian walked over to Zi Feng and passed her an elixir. Zi Feng shook her head and said, "I don't need it." She was a divine phoenix, so her self-healing ability was powerful. But her nasty and icy gaze was staring straight at the cultivators before her now. It was as if she was furious with them. She was someone who was rarely bullied. Back at the Eastern Deity Island, she bullied others and never the other way round. It was true that none of these people were from ordinary backgrounds, but neither was she. Her father was Lord Phoenix, and he dominated that region with the supreme deity Donglai. Yi Futian didn't try to persuade her further. He looked up at Chen Yi and asked, "What did he do?" "He snatched a treasure from the nebula," replied Zi Feng. Furthermore, it was when the others had helped to open the way in. They were about to get to the treasure when he dashed in and grabbed it instead. Yi Futian felt his heart twitch slightly. This fellow was a really vicious one. No wonder so many people had surrounded him. But he did an excellent job, Zifeng complimented him. The divine light in her eyes glinted as she stared at the others and said, also, he could have just run off with the treasure but got implicated by us. These fellows actually turned around to attack us to force Chen Yi to come back. Yi Futian looked at Zifeng in shock. This obstinate phoenix was also someone unafraid of trouble. Earlier on, Yi Wuchen's situation wasn't so bad. Everyone was here to cultivate, and you owned whatever comprehension you gained from the cultivation. Most importantly, once he had swallowed the nebula, it belonged to him, and nobody else could take it away from him. But treasures were different. As long as you had your hands on it, you were constantly in danger. Once others found out you had a treasure, they would naturally want to snatch it from you. If you hand it over now, we can let you off, one of the powerful cultivators surrounding Chen Yi spoke up. They didn't dare to let their guard down. Chen Yi had other treasures on him, and he moved at the speed of light. That was how Chen Yi managed to get that treasure earlier. They had opened up the way only to end up benefiting Chen Yi and allowing him to take the treasure away. There was no way they were letting this fellow off easily. The treasure was left behind in the galaxy, so it belongs to whoever manages to get their hands on it. Since all of you helped open the way, I can only thank everyone from the bottom of my heart. There are many other treasures in the galaxy too. You can look around. Several others have already made their way there. Why insist on targeting me? Responded Chen Yi with a smile. His body was bathing in divine light as if he was ready to run any minute. He looked down and glanced over at Yi Futian. He transmitted his voiceover. Are you going to help me or not? Yi Futian looked up at him. This fellow actually knew how to ask for help. How do you expect me to help you in such a situation? Replied Yi Futian via transmission. I'll take care of the folks below. You can save yourself and run if you can. Just take it that we don't know each other. Chen Yi stared down at Yi Futian in shock. He couldn't believe such a heartless person existed. Just take it that they didn't know each other. Chapter 22:16, Mightiness. Seeing that Yi Futian clearly didn't intend to fight at all, Chen Yi knew that he had been heartlessly abandoned. He couldn't help but curse Yi Futian for being a disloyal friend, thinking it had all been a waste of his kindness before. It seemed like he had to rely on himself. Chen Yi looked around at the people surrounding him. All these powerful cultivators had sealed this entire area off, so if he wanted to escape, he would have to smash right through the great path energy they used to seal the area. That would be a bit too difficult to do. So, none of you intend to do me this favor, said Chen Yi as he looked around. None of them budged after hearing what Chen Yi said, they even looked at him rather mockingly. Was this guy still able to do anything about this situation? Since you're not going to do me any favors, then fine, I'll give you the treasure. The next thing Chen Yi said made everyone take a double take. They stared at him speechlessly, then watched as a treasure really appeared in Chen Yi's hand and glowed brilliantly. He flung it out from his hand, and it floated in the void. That was exactly the item he had snatched earlier. What the? Everyone was stunned for a moment, but it only lasted 1 moment. An explosive blast could be heard the next moment as several hands reached out to grab the item. Some of them immediately tore through the void. Each one accelerated to their maximum speed to be the fastest to get their hands on that treasure. They couldn't be bothered about Chen Yi anymore at this point. Several large palms were headed straight for the treasure, and the sounds of their palms crashing into one another were horrifying as a fight immediately broke out. Nobody was going to allow anybody else to get their hands on it. Woong! Just then, a beam of light suddenly shone and flashed right past everyone else. This beam of light was too quick, so all they saw was a flash of light that passed and disappeared immediately. But what also disappeared immediately after that was the treasure they were fighting for just a moment ago. Everyone looked up in shock to see the beam of light shoot out into the distance, cutting a line through the sky and leaving only a faint trail. I can't believe all of you didn't learn your lesson, a provoking voice came from afar. The cultivators felt like they had been played out, and their expressions were particularly nasty. Chen Yi had fooled so many high-level cultivators, And the worst part was that he had pulled the same trick on them twice. Once they started fighting among themselves, he had gone at top speed to dash in and run off with the treasure. They had made the same mistake twice, and this stemmed from their greed. After all, the moment Chen Yi flung the treasure out, the first thing they thought of was to hurry up and snatch it. If one didn't grab it, someone else would. Nobody would think of guarding Chen Yi since that meant that someone else would get their hands on the treasure instead. If someone else got the treasure, there was no point in holding Chen Yi captive anymore. Besides, all of this had happened too quickly. Chen Yi had very cleverly used this sort of logic to trick these people again and run off with the treasure yet again. Boom, boom, boom. An alarming aura began to explode from each person. Beams of divine light shot through the sky at an insane rate as they tore right through the galaxy. Each beam was headed for that first flash of light. It was obvious that many of them were incensed. It was no longer a simple matter of fighting for treasure now. They were now feeling challenged and insulted. Some of them knew that they couldn't catch up with Chen Yi, so they remained where they were without bothering to give chase. Instead, they looked down below them, and their gaze fell on Futian and his other companions. It was as if they were one team. This was exactly how they had forced Chen Yi to retrace his steps. Futian had a strange look on his face now. This fellow had actually just run off with the treasure. What a surprise. But did that idiot purposely say those provoking words as revenge on how Futian wanted to pretend not to know him? As expected, the cultivators around Futian had an unfriendly look in their eyes. Blind Tai, Fangari, and the rest were gathered together, and they looked back at the other cultivators warily. Everyone here are high-level people from various factions of power. Every feud is traced back to one person, just like how every debt belongs to a creditor. Since he's the one who snatched a treasure from all of you can go and snatch it back from him. We are not well acquainted with him, so I hope that everyone will not implicate the innocent, said Futian as he stretched his arms out in a shrug. But it was obvious that nobody was buying it. Several mighty shadows put pressure on them as they trapped them within this space. Even though this was only one of the areas in the starry space where people had gathered, there were still a fair number of high-level cultivators. Some of them were also perfect Great Path high-level Renhuangs. If we take all of you down, he's going to come back for sure, said one of them. If you still insist on implicating the innocent, then we're not going to sit by and do nothing, said Futian in a cold and distant voice. He looked around at the cultivators around him. More than one person from each major faction of power had come, and while some were powerful, some not so. Besides those high-level Renhuangs, there were also Renhuangs of other levels. A terrifying aura descended as nobody cared about what Futian said. In fact, some of them had already begun to make their attack. One of them raised his hand, and a storm of the Great Path immediately gathered above him, followed by the appearing of a storm pagoda. This storm pagoda was suspended in the skies and kept expanding until it covered the whole place. Frightening lightning bolts could be seen below the storm pagoda, and each part of the storm seemed to contain alarming levels of destructive power. Blind Tai flew up into the sky and took a step forward. The heavens and earth roared as his divine hammer appeared once more. An equally alarming powerful storm was born, and it weighed heavily on this vast space. Every cultivator standing in different positions started to launch their attacks. Shi Kuei, Jiu Huai, and the rest also took a step forward to unleash their own frightening auras. Futian glanced at all those Renhuangs with an aloof look on his face. The power of the Great Path flowed through his body, and a ferocious booming resonated from within his body, echoing in this space, causing loud blasts to ring out loud. More frighteningly, his body seemed to give off a seemingly sacred sort of glow, which made him look extremely otherworldly. His eyes seemed to transform into demon eyes, and it was as if a heart was beating wildly within him, causing this demonic chi to fill the place. Doong doong, doong many eyes were staring at Futian. They seemed to all have sensed the aura of a demon god. The aura that was emanating from Futian's body shocked them somewhat. This was the aura of a level 6 Renhuang, but even level 7 Renhuangs felt threatened. Just his aura alone was already no weaker than powerful level 7 Renhuangs like themselves. Also, there was an incredibly frightening force that gripped their hearts, causing their hearts to palpitate, as if they could hear the wild pounding of the heart within Yi Futian's body. "Be careful, there's the aura of the demon god," said one of them as he stared at Yi Futian. He could tell that Yi Futian must have had some incredible experiences. That's Yi Futian. He got to view the divine body of Shunjia, the great emperor in Shangqing domain, and it said that he comprehended the extraordinary body of the great path, and now his physical body is invincible, spoke another man. Yi Futian was surprised that this other man knew who he was. It seemed like he was gaining a reputation out there now, so even cultivators from other domains knew of his existence. But these cultivators still looked like they were prepared for battle, as if this information only made them want to spar with Yi Futian even more than before. Whoom! A demonic storm swept through space, and a gigantic illusion of a peacock appeared behind Yi Futian. When the peacock god spread its feathers, it was as if countless pairs of eyes had appeared, and each pair of eyes was shooting out a frightening demonic light. The next moment, he suddenly turned into a flash as he dashed towards one particular direction at breakneck speed. "Stop him," someone shouted loudly. A powerful level 7 Renhuang immediately took a step out, and the divine might of the great path came crashing down. A giant appeared in front of Yi Futian. It was glowing gold all over as if it was wearing golden armor. When it saw that Yi Futian was coming its way, it stretched its arms forward to make an attack. Its golden divine fists penetrated the air, and countless illusions of golden fists appeared in the sky. Each of them shot upwards so fiercely that they seemed to be able to punch a hole in the sky. But Yi Futian didn't dodge or retreat but continued to hurtle towards the giant's divine fists. Yi Futian's executed his flesh becoming way, so his physical body made from flesh and blood became close to a divine body instead, containing all sorts of wills in it. He was practically invincible, and one punch could break the entire starry sky. Boom, 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 their attacks collided head-on, and the collision threatened to destroy everything around it. The ear-deafening blasts of the great path coming from within Yi Futian's body rang in the air. Several cultivators tried to attack him from all sides, but none of them managed to get close. Boom! Several frightening beams of light shone through the space, and the golden divine fist was shattered. The illusion of the peacock god went right through it, and a violent attack immediately hit that level 7 Renhuang. His body went flying out into the distance. But Yi Futian did not stop there. After he had transformed into a flash of light, he started heading for the weaker Renhuangs behind him. "Stop him," shouted one of them loudly. Several powerful Renhuangs blocked Yi Futian's body at the same time, but Yi Futian's body resounded with the sound of Buddha. Many Vajras with furious looks in their eyes went right into his opponents' heads. Then he raised his hand, and his palm became a divine monument of world suppression, which came hurtling down on them. This was an incredibly domineering move. Every person who tried to kill Yi Futian earlier was forced backward by the impact. Some were still trying to block him, so Yi Futian swung his other hand forward. An indestructible long spear instantly appeared and shattered everything it pierced. "Retreat!" All the Renhuangs behind started running far away from Yi Futian, but he suddenly clenched his fist, which immediately caused sealed off the space before him. Several Renhuangs were trapped in this space. After that, Yi Futian sent several leaves and branches towards them, which surrounded everyone in the space. A terrifying chilly air instantly filled the space, which brought their body temperature down to 0. They had been encased in ice. Chapter 22:17, Fighting Everyone Himself. The other cultivators looked toward Yi Futian to see vines extending from an ancient tree surround the bodies of those Renhuangs in front of him, and nobody dared to do anything rash. Even though the people under Yi Futian's control weren't from the same group as each other, nobody dared to do anything that might kill someone else. Everybody here had an extraordinary identity, and any deaths would result in a lot of trouble. Once a feud was created, nobody knew what sort of consequence would await them. The Renhuangs were sealed in ice. Everyone's eyes were on Yi Futian. That cold air he had sent out wasn't like the ordinary will of ice but seemed more like the power of yin instead. It was bitingly cold and was at sub-zero temperatures. Wisps of the power of yin had flowed out of Yi Futian and through the vines of the tree, which then spread into the bodies of the Renhuang that were under his control, sealing all of them in ice. Even if one had a powerful will, there was no way of getting out of this. Several cultivators, who had left the earlier battle, came towards Futian from all directions and surrounded him. They took a step forward, and an alarming aura and might of the great path weighed heavily in the air. Their gazes were icy cold as they stared at Futian and said, "Let them go." Clearly, some of the cultivators sealed in ice were on their team. As I said earlier, every feud is traced back to one person, just like how every debt belongs to a creditor. None of you came here alone, so if you want to get the treasure, then go look for the person who took the treasure, said Futian as he looked back at everyone else. After he finished saying that, the branches unraveled themselves and the power of yin receded. A loud blast was heard immediately after that as the renhuangs struggled out of their frozen state. "Otherwise, I won't be so kind the next time," continued Futian. The renhuangs who struggled out of their frozen state trembled slightly all over because the coldness had seeped into their limbs and bones, even seeping into their souls. When they were sealed in ice earlier, they felt as though their life and even their thoughts were about to stop, as if they were truly going to become a corpse. The power of yin was an absolute sort of iciness, so it could also freeze and seal souls. If Futian let them go too late, they could suffer irreparable damage to their great path. "You're truly the only renhuang who has been able to view Xinjia the Great Emperor's divine body," sounded an authoritative voice. A powerful old man was speaking as he stared at Futian. The aura he emanated was terrifying, and he was a level 8. As he stared at Futian, he observed that the boy had a full head of silver hair, a brilliant glow around his body, the air of the demon god coming out from him, the illusion of the peacock demon god hanging high above him, as well as an incredible amount of divine light circulating within his body. Such a constitution could be considered invincible. It was rare to see anybody of the same level. On top of that, he could also see at least 3 different mighty powers that he had inherited. There was the power from the peacock demon god, the power of yin, and the terrifying body of the great path created from looking at Xinjia the Great Emperor. All these powers he inherited seemed to have turned him into a human-shaped monster, and he was way more terrifying than all the other perfect Great Path renhuangs. During the short fight earlier, all of them had already noticed this. Never mind the level 6 perfect Great Path cultivators, even those at level 7 were unable to withstand his storm-like attacks. This body of the Great Path was certainly invincible to those at the same level as him. If he launched an attack, none of them would be able to defend themselves against him. The very powerful level 7 cultivator who fought Futian before this had been very aggressive. However, he still ended up being sent flying by Futian's violent attack before Futian turned to deal with all the other people behind him. It seemed like this young man with white hair wasn't only going to become the most extraordinary person in the Shangqing continent. Still, he would probably have a place among the best and most legendary characters of the divine continent. "I would like to know the extent of your prowess." Just then, a middle-aged level 7 renhuang took a step forward and looked at Futian as he stood above him. He didn't say that he wanted to fight because of Chen Yi. Instead, he said he wanted to know Futian's true fighting abilities. He wanted to know how powerful this logic-defying renhuang that appeared from nowhere in Shangqing continent really was. "I would like to know too. I want to know the prowess of a cultivator who was the only one who managed to comprehend the divine body of Xinjia the Great Emperor." Yet another man stepped forward. He was also a frightening level 7. Blind Tai and the rest came over to where Futian was. They watched as one powerful cultivator after another stepped forward. Several powerful renhuangs were all interested in sparring with Futian. For cultivators from top factions of power, they were already the kings and leaders of the region they were from, and very few opponents could match them in power. Any high-level perfect Great Path renhuang would be considered the cream of the crop in whichever region they were from. For example, the 4 legendary characters from Donghua Domain, Ninghua, Zhongchan, and the rest were all at this level. People like them also wanted to spar with others at their level too. Futian could be considered someone invincible in his region as well, and was a powerful renhuang who could even fight those from other regions as well. Such a character was hard to come by. He was truly a genius among geniuses and would be someone who would make the name of the divine continent be heard far and wide in the near future. And so, they all wanted to have a go. Of course, some thought that if they could take Yi Futian down at the same time, that would be even better. Yi Futian looked at the people around him. Every single person who had stepped forward had a terrifying aura around them. They were all cultivators at the same level as Zhongchan back then, so they could be considered people who were nearly at the top of the cultivation world. Sure, replied Yi Futian as he looked at all of them. If a level 8 does not want to fight, then the rest of you can try together. But if all of you lose the fight, then that will be the end of today's matter. All of them were speechless after hearing what Yi Futian said. He said that they could try together. A level 8 was definitely not going to try. If it was a real battle of life and death, then your level didn't really matter. But if it was merely a friendly match to spar and understand Yi Futian's true capabilities, then it wasn't ethical for someone who was 2 levels higher to participate. The difference between the 2 levels would automatically make it unfair even before fighting, and it really wouldn't be considered sparring anymore. As for a level 7, Yi Futian had already displayed incredible prowess earlier by defeating a level 7 soundly earlier. So all the level 7s wanted to give it a shot. But this young fellow was actually telling all of them to try together. Those words were a little too arrogant. In the high skies, one of them had jet black eyes and seemed to have a dark aura around him. He stared rather deeply at Yi Futian and had gathered with the other level 7 cultivators. From his point of view, Yi Futian's value had gone way beyond the value of that treasure that Chen Yi had run off with. If he could take Yi Futian down and strip him of all the inherited powers he had, that would be worth way more than one measly treasure. With that in mind, a strange glint gleamed in his eyes, and he started to get a little excited now. In that case, let them fight then. The few level 8 cultivators stepped back to move out from the fighting arena. Yi Futian took a step forward and stood in the vast starry space. In front of him, several powerful cultivators were releasing terrifying auras that weighed heavily on Yi Futian. Blind Tai and the rest were standing at a lower area and looked warily at the fighting arena. Even though the other cultivators claimed that it was just a sparring session, they still had to beware of someone suddenly making a fatal move. Human hearts were hard to predict, and these were cultivators from various factions of power, so nobody knew what each other was really thinking about. Wong. Just then, a frightening and incredible illusion appeared behind one of the Renhuangs. A glorious sun appeared, dyeing the stars red. The vast space looked like it had been covered with flames as the divine light of that endless sun, turning into several divine swords of the sun. His eyes had also transformed into the sun and shot out terrifying divine flames. With one thought, the divine sunlight shone down, and the devastating divine fire of the sun burned everything in its path to a crisp as it threatened to devour Yi Futian's body. Everyone could feel that intense heat wave in the air, and everywhere that the divine sunlight touched seemed to be on fire as they all turned into the color of flames. The illusion of the peacock demon god behind Yi Futian gave off a gorgeous light, sending out several beams of demonic lightning which contained the power of yin. It clashed head-on with those divine swords of sunlight. In that instant, a frightening collision exploded in the space. 2 forces had crashed into one another among the stars, and one side had been destroyed and dissipated. The countless divine swords of sunlight had actually been unable to reach Yi Futian at all. The other powerful cultivators felt their pupils constrict slightly as they stared at Yi Futian. Their bodies also exploded with a mighty might of the Great Path and started to conjure up a terrifying attack. Chapter 22:18 Practitioners of 3 Major Realms. The practitioners from afar gazed towards the battlefield. They saw the Sun Sword rain, Sun God Sword, and Sun Lightning display 2 completely different colors. They were gorgeous. At the same time, the attacks of the others arrived. Stars appeared in a person's hand. Above him, a giant appeared. When he extended his large palm forward, the palm of the giant in the sky grabbed at Yi Futian's body directly as if a giant starry palm. Stars revolved in the palm, and an immeasurable strength hid within it, a strength that could annihilate everything in its path. Yi Futian raised his head and glanced at it. He could only feel heaven and earth changing. He had entered the enemy's divine wheel of the Great Path's domain. It was like a starry dimension. In this starry dimension, the giant starry palm slammed towards him. It would annihilate everything. It was unstoppable. Boom! An endlessly overbearing aura burst from Yi Futian's body. The crackling sound of explosions covered the entire sky. It was like the roar of thunder. He raised his arm, and countless starry stelae appeared everywhere. Every stele contained a frightening ancient inscription, which was the extreme attack power he learned from the Millet Emperor's Gate of World Suppression. Then, at that moment, a whooshing sounded. Golden spatial storms sliced through the sky as if countless thin and sharp blades had sliced the sky into pieces. They sliced towards Yi Futian's body. Multiple cultivators attacked at the same time. Wave after wave of attacks poured towards him. A chill flashed in Yi Futian's eyes as the attacks flew at him. He leaped into the sky. His not-so-stalwart body caused the sky to tremble violently as if he was a humanoid monster. Divine lights radiated from his body. It was as if his mortal body had transformed into a starry battle form. Stars revolved. Divine lights of the great path of space and the lights of the demon god also radiated from the surface of his body. The frightening golden blades had sliced through the sky and were imminent. They slashed towards his body. However, spacelight runes appeared. Everyone was surprised to discover that multiple doors of space had appeared around Yi Futian. They revolved around his body and formed an absolute space, devouring all the attacks coming at him. Bang! A loud bang rang in the air. Yi Futian stepped into the sky while his body shot straight towards a certain direction. It was the direction of the person who summoned the starry god of war. The starry god of war moved in the sky and extended its hand toward Yi Futian. Vong! Yi Futian's body transformed into lightning. Divine light of peacock burst from his body as they merged into one. Infusing the path of sword, he was like an indestructible sword. He flew directly across the sky. Loud rumbling noises rang in the air. His body went directly through the frightening giant starry palm. Then, he charged into the star giant's body. In an instant, countless beams of frightening divine light shot out of the star giant's body. Following that, its body burst into pieces. The light did not stop after puncturing the giant. After going through it, Yi Futian continued charging towards the practitioner. The practitioner moved his body back, but the light was too quick. In an instant, it had arrived in front of him. A giant figure that looked like an ancient god appeared behind him and extended both its arms out in front to block Yi Futian's attack. Boom! Yi Futian's body reached as a sword, slamming into both his opponent's palms. Rumbling sounds rang in the air. Cracks appeared on both palms as they continued to crackle and crumble. Yi Futian directly passed through those cracks. Then, he raised his hand and pointed. With a plop, the person's body was punctured and blown away. He could not withstand Yi Futian's close-range attack. However, at that moment, a frightening golden figure appeared in the sky. It slammed a monstrous divine fist at Yi Futian. Countless streams of golden light appeared and filled the starry sky. They also buried Yi Futian's body. Every fist was huge. Fists that radiated golden light filled the sky. They came from every direction. There was no way to escape. What an overbearing attack. Many people trembled as they watched. Duan Qiong recalled a super-powerful faction as this scene. Yi Futian also felt a sense of familiarity. Back then, he was pursued by a ridiculously strong person with similar skills. Back then, it was also a battle in the Void Realm. It was a battle in the Shadow Realm. A powerful Renhuang of the Empty Mountain pushed him to the brink. Yi Futian stared wide-eyed as the golden divine fists flew toward him. Boom, 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 boom. Fists slammed into Yi Futian's body. His tiny body was directly buried under a flurry of fists. The practitioners watching from afar could not help but feel their hearts tremble as they gazed at the center of all the divine fists. The golden light from the divine fists radiated brightly. Waves of fist wills surged forward. An overbearing Renhuang wearing a golden outfit appeared in the sky. He looked down at Yi Futian below him. An enormous amount of the power of the Great Path continued to ooze out from his body. In the middle of the flurry of divine fists, everyone could see a tiny body in the midst. Both arms and legs were extended to withhold the gigantic divine fist. His body was also hit. However, The onlookers were shocked to discover the profound coldness in his eyes. He raised his head to look at the cultivator in the sky. He was actually fine. He's still okay even after this. People's hearts beat faster. They looked at the beautiful giant body. The golden shockwaves of its divine fists could continuously destroy a human's body and completely annihilate a person. Even if Yi Futian's body was unparalleled, even if he survived, he should have been severely injured. However, even after taking those hits, he was actually still fine. Was his body still that of a mortal's? Dong, dong. It was as if everyone could hear his intense heartbeats, which made everyone's heart beat in rhythm with his. Yi Futian raised his head. An arrogance that completely disregarded everything could be seen in his gaze. The power of yin began to emanate from his body. In an instant, the golden divine fist began to be covered under a veil of frost. At the same time, an illusion of the peacock demon god formed. A frightening divine light burst from within Yi Futian's body. In an instant, blindingly bright divine light burst forth, and those giant divine fists were completely blown to bits. Before long, they were all swept away, and nothing was left. Meanwhile, Yi Futian's figure still floated in the sky. His pitch-black pupils scanned the cultivators as if he was an indestructible person. It was as if he could not be killed or destroyed. Under the raging winds that tore through space, the peacock demon god flapped its wings. Yi Futian directly headed towards the empty mountain practitioner in the sky. He also wanted to pay him back for earlier. The empty mountain practitioner's eyes shrunk. He took a step in the sky. Then, behind him, a giant golden god of war illusion appeared. Then, he extended both his hands at the same time. Countless divine fists filled the sky, and each of the fists flew towards Yi Futian as if they were a stream of golden fist will. The sun and sky were completely blocked out. Vong! A golden space divine wing appeared above Yi Futian. Then, a frightening image appeared above the sky. It was actually a picture of a golden rock heaven slayer. It looked as if a giant ancient rock with golden wings had appeared. Yi Futian's body had transformed into the giant golden-winged rock. He flew across the sky and plowed through the flurry of golden fists, destroying them into bits and pieces all the way until he reached his opponent. The empty mountain practitioner was actually still calm even though Yi Futian had easily arrived in front of him. The golden divine giant behind him covered his body, its arms moved forward. Two fists flew out and broke through the sky. Nobody knew just how powerful they were. One punch could have destroyed thousands or tens of thousands of miles of space. Roar! Then, a shocking roar rang in the air. Yi Futian's body had transformed into a starry war ape. Its body was humongous, and it also swung both its fists forward. The flung fists were like two stars that had been shot forward. Rumble! A devastating sound of collision filled the air. Countless stars flew forward and made the golden body of the enemy tremble. Whether it was the golden rock heaven slayer or the starry war ape, they were among the 7 great divine techniques that he learned from Four Corner Village. Yi Futian had cultivated at the village for many years. He had reached a level where he could use them at any time. His understanding of the divine techniques was very profound. As the two collided together, a shadowy figure appeared above them. It was as if a dark ancient god had appeared above them. Countless grey streams of air swirled and flowed toward Yi Futian's body. In an instant, everything around him had been devoured. The grey streams of air were like dark chains that had tied him up and flowed into his body, which made Yi Futian feel the strength drain from his body. His spiritual soul was shaken. Soul chain. Yi Futian raised his head and glanced above. He saw a dark pair of eyes. This was one of the strongest practitioners of the dark world. The dark streams of air being drawn towards him were soul chains. Bang! Both his arms vibrated. He sent the empty mountain practitioner flying away. Yi Futian's shifted his gaze toward the cultivator with an intense and cold stare. Soul chain. He wanted to take his spiritual soul and keep it locked up. In this battle, he faced powerful practitioners from the 3 major realms, the Divine Prefecture, Empty Mountain, and the Dark World all at the same time. Naturally, after seeing this scene, the other practitioners could not help but slightly shrink their eyes and stare at the frightening image up above. A god of ghost illusion seemed to have appeared above Futian. It had a pair of dark eyes. The soul chain that originated from above the god of ghosts illusion surrounded Futian as if it wanted to extract Futian's soul. On Futian's body, an illusory figure of a person had already begun to appear. His spiritual soul wanted to leave the body. The person did not come for the treasure. He came for Futian. Indeed, Futian's value was higher than the treasure. That was why the cultivator from the dark world suddenly intervened. A battle. A battle against the practitioners of the three major realms. Chapter 22:19, Attacked instead. It looked like Futian was in danger. All the cultivators looked towards the battlefield. They could see Futian's spiritual soul already. His physical body was at an unrivaled level, and he was practically invincible. In the battle earlier, he had proven to have fought with great ease. Even level 7 perfect Great Path cultivators were unable to break through his defenses. But when that high-level cultivator from the dark world made an attack, he targeted Futian's spiritual soul. A cultivator's spiritual soul was a lot weaker than the cultivator's body, and very few cultivated the power of their spiritual soul. So once it was attacked, that cultivator would be in deep trouble because a spiritual soul was way more fragile than a physical body. This dark world cultivator dared to use such a vicious method of attack at this time, probably because he had the ability to attack a spiritual soul. Otherwise, given the incredible fighting prowess that Futian displayed earlier, this man probably wouldn't have dared to do anything rash. After all, right now, he was trying to capture a soul. He was trying to lock down Futian's spiritual soul and take it away, which was an extremely ruthless move and was no longer within the definition of a friendly match. Once the spiritual soul left its body and was taken away, Futian's physical body would become nothing but an empty shell with no soul, and others could do whatever they wanted with it. When they saw this happening, all the cultivators from Four Corner Village started moving towards where the fight was and was ready to head upwards to attack. But at the same time, level 8 cultivators also began walking towards them and blocked their way. One of them said very loudly, "They were the ones who came up with this friendly match, so why are all of you going to interfere?" It was obvious that none of these people would be kind to Futian. Once they found an opportunity, they would happily bring Futian down since that was their original intention for fighting in the first place. Now that this dark world cultivator had made such a move, it was great news for them. That way, they wouldn't offend Four Corner Village. Many of them had heard about how a mysterious man with a terrifying prowess was in Four Corner Village. "Get lost," roared Fangari angrily. A frightening divine light of space shone brilliantly as he wanted to go right through the crowd. But those level 8 cultivators immediately unleashed a great path domain to separate him from the battlefield, stopping them from getting near and providing help. In an instant, a terrifying clash broke out on this side, too. On the other side, back within the battlefield, the soul chains forced Futian's spiritual soul to leave his body, and they were also able to eat away and hurt his soul. This made Futian feel a deep chill inside him. That was a chill that came from his spiritual soul. His heart turned cold, and a murderous thought shot out through his eyes. An attack on his spiritual soul was as good as an attempt to kill him. Wung! The brilliance of divine light sparkled and covered Futian's body, giving him an otherworldly glow. Futian's spiritual soul seemed to have really left his physical body and was being pulled away by those dark chains. Futian's physical body stood in the space without moving. His spiritual soul seemed to have become a physical body in itself, and a frightening illusion appeared, like a celestial shadow. The eyes of the dark world Renhuang grew icy as even more frightening dark chains headed for that celestial shadow. But at that moment, all those chains seemed to be covered in a layer of frost, which slowly encased the chains in ice. This iciness spread at a rapid pace, moving along the dark chains and headed straight for the gigantic illusion of the dark deity in the void. There! That powerful deity-like body felt a chill that seeped into his bones, and the dark world cultivator shuddered. He felt like his own spiritual soul was cold all over as if it had been attacked by the cold. Boom! The terrible cold continued to climb upwards, following the soul chains and entering the illusion of the deity. After that, a terrifying heat was unleashed. Yi Futian's spiritual soul glowed brilliantly and seemed to become the yin-yang symbol as the sun and moon intertwined. Both cold and hot were unleashed at the same time, causing both the power of yin and the power of the sun to rush into the body of the illusion of the deity. A blood-curdling scream was heard as the deity instantly suffered a terrifying attack on its spiritual soul. Countless beams of dark divine light shot out in an attempt to destroy Yi Futian's brilliantly shining spiritual soul. But Yi Futian's spiritual soul brought both the divine light of yin and the sun further up, swallowing all the dark currents and destroying everything. It was as if he was letting the other party take hold of his soul. Since he wanted his spiritual soul, then he could have it. Boom! This time, it was the Dark World cultivator's turn to suffer. He gave a low roar as the illusion of the deity continued to get destroyed. With a loud roar, his body flew upwards and tried to get away. He got rid of the soul chains and stopped trying to take Yi Futian's spiritual soul. However, the divine light of yin and the sun that Yi Futian's spiritual soul had unleashed caused the illusion of the deity to continue shattering into tiny pieces. The other party immediately retreated to a faraway place, screaming along the way. Even his body seemed to become a little unreal. Oh my goodness! All the other cultivators watching felt their hearts tremble at this sight. The Dark World cultivator nearly got killed instead. They watched as Yi Futian's spiritual soul floated back downwards and returned to his physical body. His body of the Great Path sparkled as divine light enveloped his body. He looked up to glance at the figure that had disappeared into the distance. This Dark World cultivator had tried to use his spiritual soul to attack him but had gotten attacked instead. Even though Yi Futian hadn't managed to kill him, his spiritual soul had been very severely injured. If there was nobody powerful enough to help him or if he couldn't get the precious spiritual soul elixir, he would take at least the next 8 to 10 years to recover from today. He looked around at the crowd and said to all the cultivators surrounding him, "Does everyone still want to continue?" Before this, several cultivators had attacked him at the same time, and everyone had been forced to retreat and were hurt. But some who hadn't made any attack earlier. However, after seeing what happened in the battle earlier, all of them already understood that level 7 perfect Great Path Renhuangs couldn't possibly defeat Yi Futian unless you were one of those geniuses. He had defeated cultivators from the 3 major worlds without any exception. Even those Dark World cultivators' sudden attack on Yi Futian's spiritual soul had backfired and got attacked instead. One could say that this battle had been pretty straightforward and one-sided, barely even threatening Yi Futian. That powerful cultivator from the empty divine realm had already gone all out with such a domineering attack. He had been able to shatter the divine fist in the void and slam down on Yi Futian's body, but even though he had hit Yi Futian, the impact of his hit had been broken, and he had not been able to hurt Yi Futian at all. How was anyone supposed to continue fighting such a monster? One man had been able to defeat some of the best from the 3 major worlds. If one wanted to defeat Yi Futian, they'd have to find a level 8 Renhuang to do it. In that case, then this matter comes to a close here. If you want to get that treasure back, then go and look for the one who took it. Don't implicate innocent parties, said Yi Futian before going back down to where Fangari and the rest were. The fight on their side also stopped. All the level 8 cultivators stared at Yi Futian, and they all looked a little unsettled. They couldn't believe that the earlier attack hadn't worked. They had purposely blocked Fangari and the rest from helping Yi Futian so that the Dark World cultivator had a chance to take Yi Futian down. They didn't expect this attempt to fail. Please don't waste any more time. There are treasures in other places as well. After Yi Futian left them with those words, he turned and left. His companions also followed behind him, marching off confidently and leaving this place. This time, nobody tried to stop Yi Futian anymore. Everyone watched as Yi Futian walked off, and a look of deep thought could be seen in their eyes. I'm afraid this man will become a truly great character in the Divine Continent, someone finally spoke up. All of them were the cream of the crop among their peers, but it had been a very long time since they saw a Renhuang as extraordinary as Yi Futian. He was only at level 6 now. But in the future, he would probably become a super powerful character. Of course, that was assuming he didn't die before that. After Yi Futian and his companions left, They continued to head further up the starry skies. He didn't bother himself with Chen Yi. He had experienced that fellow's speed for himself after all. Back then, Ning Hua already had trouble catching up with him. Furthermore, his cultivation level had increased, and his way of light was certainly much stronger, and his speed would be much faster. He was probably the fastest person in the world when it came to running for his life. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to snatch that treasure under the noses of so many powerful cultivators. There were several nebulas in different parts of the starry skies. Fights had broken out in many places, and it was a terrifying sight to behold. Thankfully, they weren't on land but in space, so these fights would not bring harm to innocent parties, and everyone could fight to their heart's content here. Yi Futian didn't know how many treasures here had been placed by cultivators from Ziwei Imperial Palace, but it was clear that certain areas had been left behind from Ziwei the Great's cultivation. For example, the nebula that Yi Wuchen had swallowed earlier was probably the sword will left behind by Ziwei the Great, which turned into a sword-shaped nebula. Besides that place, there were many other parts, which were extremely difficult to comprehend. Many high-level cultivators were still trying their best to comprehend and uncover all the secrets within, but they had not been successful so far. "Where are we going?" Fang Gari stood beside Yi Futian and asked him. Yi Futian's eyes looked towards the highest point in the sky, where the illusion of a great emperor stood in the starry sky with a heavenly scroll in hand. That was probably where most high-level cultivators had congregated, and they would probably be the best from various worlds. All of them wanted to uncover this ultimate secret and find out what was the greatest inheritance that Ziwei the Great had left behind. Also, what was in that heavenly scroll? This was also something that piqued Yi Futian's interest the most. But of course, if Ziwei the Great had really hidden an inheritance here, then it would certainly not be easy to obtain it. Ziwei the Great was a great emperor of ancient days, and this place must have existed for many, many years now. Ziwei Imperial Palace was in control of everything here, but the cultivators of Ziwei Imperial Palace still had not gained enlightenment of these secrets till today. So this was definitely a complicated process. Ziwei the Great was a ruler of the Ziwei segmentum. This segmentum worshipped Ziwei the Great, and top cultivators cultivated like him. This place was filled with some of the world's greatest geniuses, and if even these people had been unable to comprehend anything, the chances of them comprehending anything were slim. But of course, it wasn't all hopeless. This time, several things that the great emperor had left behind had been inherited. After all, some of the most legendary characters from all over the world had come this time. Many of them were extremely gifted, so their overall abilities were greater than the cultivators in the Ziwei segmentum. Yi Futian stopped walking and stood in the vast starry sky. The stars above shone on him as he turned back to look at the vast starry world. "What's wrong?" Jiyu Dongliu asked him quietly. "Nothing. I was casually looking around to see if I could see anything different," replied Yi Futian. "I want to go up there and have a look. Do you want to come with me or go elsewhere? There are many other places around here where you can gain enlightenment. We'll go to other places and not waste any time there." "But 2 people ought to go along with you," said Jiyu Dongliu. Even though he possessed an extraordinary inheritance himself, he had some degree of self-awareness too. If any of them were going to stand out among the rest of the cultivators here, only Yi Futian fit the bill. It was impossible for the rest of them. He wasn't looking down on himself. This was just a sincere understanding of himself. There were way too many legendary characters here. After being sent by Princess Donghuang to the Divine Continent to cultivate all these years, he also saw some super powerful legends and confirmed that their difference in level was significant. If he said that he was confident of winning the cultivators in these starry skies, that would definitely be a sign of audacity. It was better to go elsewhere to have a look and try his luck to see if he could be enlightened. "I'll go with him," avowed Blind Tai. He couldn't see and never thought about inheriting anything else. He was happy to cultivate his divine hammer of the protector to the best he could. Having one powerful move was better than having 1,000 low-level moves. Cultivating one aspect to its maximum was better than having to learn 1,000 different cultivation techniques. The divine hammer of the protector had also been left behind by a great character from history, the Four-Corner Great Emperor. He was a pioneer of Four Corner Village. As for why he wanted to protect Yi Futian, it probably came out from a hope he had in Yi Futian. Yi Futian had completely rewritten Four Corner Village's destiny, and they all knew that if they wanted to continue to rewrite Four Corner Village's destiny, the most important person was Yi Futian. He was considered one of the villagers, but all his disciples were the future of the village, including his own son. And so, after they left Four Corner Village, Blind Tai had always been taking up the role of protecting Yi Futian. Fangari also did the same. "I'll stay with him, too. The rest of you can go and have a look elsewhere," Fangari spoke up. He didn't have strong ambitions either, since the next 2 generations after him were even more outstanding. He and Fang Huan had been rescued from the ancient royal family of Duan by Yi Futian, and Fang Kun was now a disciple of Yi Futian. So Yi Futian was a huge benefactor to his family, and everything he did now was not only for the sake of the Fang family's future but also a bid to repay Yi Futian for his kindness. Also, Fangari himself was a brilliant man who could tell that Yi Futian was the right choice. That was why he went along with old Ma to chase the entire Muyun family out of the village. Everything that happened later showed that he had certainly made the right choice. Now, even the Nanhai family could not surpass the extraordinary position that Four Corner Village had within the Shangqing continent. The village would only become more and more powerful, so Muyun Long was bound to regret staying with the Nanhai family in the future. Sure. All of them nodded slightly. With 2 level 8 cultivators protecting Yi Futian and Yi Futian's own prowess, as long as they didn't run into anybody too powerful, they should do just fine. Actually, Yi Futian by himself was already enough, but his position was way too important to the rest, so they placed his safety as their priority. On top of that, Yi Futian often attracted powerful attacks on himself. Now that he wanted to comprehend Ziwei the Great's inheritance, he could run into the most powerful character in this universe. The group split ways. Yi Futian, Blind Tai, and Fangari continued heading upwards, while the rest left for other parts of the starry sky. As they headed upwards, Yi Futian could feel a divine aura that felt like true might hit him. It was as if one of the great emperors of the past was still around. It was as if the will of Ziwei the Great was still here, and that's why this might existed. At this moment, Yi Futian and his companions couldn't help but feel a sense of solemnity rise from their hearts. As they moved upwards and looked up at the illusion of that divine face above them, they felt like this god was looking back at them. They were in front of a god, so they ought to bow down and worship. Besides them, many other cultivators were already in that same space. Also, these were all legendary geniuses from all over the world. Only such people would come here directly. Chapter 22-21, Formed from the Starry Sky? Ziwei the Great held a heavenly scroll in his hand. His illusory figure stood in the sky above all the cultivators. He appeared very close to all of them, yet he couldn't be reached. It was as though the cultivators would never be able to come in contact with his illusory figure. This was a face that was embedded among the stars. Ziwei the Great was right in front of their eyes, he was omnipresent. However, he was also ethereal. The cultivators could sense his might, yet they could never pinpoint his exact existence. He was like the moon reflected in a body of water. Yet, the might of Ziwei the Great felt so real, solemn, and ancient. It was as though he was standing in the sky, staring at the cultivators across space and time. Moreover, the illusory figure of Ziwei the Great had been here since time immemorial. His illusory figure was the eternal existence that protected this starry world, or it could be said that he protected the entire segment. What was this face made of? Was it a will left behind by Ziwei the Great? Yi Futian thought to himself. If an ancient, godlike Ziwei the Great had left behind his will, was it possible for him to resuscitate and come back to life? After all, Ziwei the Great was an all-powerful god. Even if just a sliver of his will was left in the world, by right, it could be said that he was immortal since he had not completely disappeared from existence. In this part of the sky, many cultivators stood beneath the illusory figure of Ziwei the Great. All of them had solemn looks on their faces as they raised their heads and gazed at the illusory figure. Even though they were all top figures from various parts of the world, None of them revealed arrogant attitudes when standing beneath the illusory figure. All of them showed their respect for the ancient great emperor. Furthermore, according to legend, Ziwei the Great was no ordinary god. He was one of the strongest in existence. He might be a cultivator among the gods, he stood at the pinnacle among all the gods. After all, according to ancient legend, it was the age of the gods before the collapse of the heavenly path. The gods also had differences in the strength of their powers during the age of the gods. Some of the cultivators sensed Futian's arrival. Most of them didn't care about him, they were focused on immersing themselves in their own meditation. Once in a while, some of them would turn around and take a look at Futian, but they showed no emotion in their eyes. They would avert their eyes after casting a glance at him. It was as though Futian did not exist. Most of the cultivators who stood here were monstrous figures at the peak. They were extremely prideful. Let alone those who didn't know who Futian was, even those who recognized him acknowledged his presence with an indifferent attitude. They would not regard him with special respect. Among all those who were present, Futian saw a few familiar figures. For example, Ning Hua, the vice-chief of Donghua Domain Manor, was amidst the crowd. Clearly, he also regarded himself as a top figure. He intended to comprehend the secret of Ziwei the Great, unveiling any teachings that might be hidden in this illusory figure. Ning Hua also turned around and glanced at Futian. A hint of murderous intent flashed in his eyes. However, he soon shifted his gaze. He did not plan to attack Futian here. Instead, he focused all his attention on comprehending the secrets of Ziwei the Great. Upon arriving, Futian quickly scanned across all the cultivators who stood in different directions. After that, he joined the crowd in raising his head and looking at the illusory figure. He was examining how this illusory figure of Ziwei the Great was formed. At first glance, this illusory figure of Ziwei the Great seemed to merge with the starry sky and appeared in front of the cultivators. However, after carefully observing it, Futian managed to figure something out. The illusory figure of Ziwei the Great was merged with the starry sky, seemingly formed from countless connecting stars. The endless stars forged this illusory figure, allowing the cultivators to make out of this ancient great emperor. Could it be that Ziwei the Great put all the stars in place to form this illusory figure? Were all these light dots formed by stars? Futian pondered as he looked at the starry sky with his head raised. All the cultivators who stood in the sky had attempted to comprehend this scene for a long while, yet up until now, none of them could comprehend it. They could only sense a vast and majestic might. Similar to Futian, they could see that an ancient god was above their heads, but they could not come in contact with the illusory figure. These cultivators exchanged their thoughts with each other. They were very open to sharing their speculations, intending to join forces to unveil the secret. They were aware that if the teachings of the great emperor truly existed here, the teachings had not been comprehended by anyone after all these years. It would be challenging to decode the secret if they only relied on themselves. It was almost an impossible mission. Therefore, they were open to sharing to rely on the collective wisdom of everyone present. If the teachings of the great emperor were truly hidden here, the cultivators would not hesitate to fight against everyone present to seize the teachings. However, they must first locate where the teachings were. Right now, none of them saw anything at all. They were willing first to work together to unveil the secret, then only fight against each other to seize the teachings. Extraordinary people naturally had extraordinary temperaments. Right then, someone's gaze landed on Futian. He said, "Come on up." After observing the silhouette of the great emperor, "What are your thoughts?" Futian looked at the person who had spoken. This person also had an extraordinary temperament. There seemed to be no ulterior meaning to his words. Futian said, "I just arrived here and have yet to observe in detail. Naturally, my findings cannot be considered comprehension. However, from observing, the silhouette of the great emperor is merged with the starry sky. I suspect that the silhouette of the great emperor might be formed from the stars." When the cultivator in the space heard what Futian said, he revealed a smile. He looked at Futian with a serious gaze and said, "Sir, may I know who you are and where you are from?" "I am Futian. I am from Four Corner Village in the Shangqing domain of the Divine Prefecture, replied Yi Futian. When the other party heard his answer, he revealed a look of realization. He smiled and said, "So you are the only cultivator from the Shangqing domain who managed to comprehend the sacred remains of Xinjia the Great Emperor. No wonder you are so outstanding. It is an honor to meet you." Yi Futian saluted back with his fists. The other party smiled and said, "We have been observing the silhouette of the Great Emperor here for some time. We spent a lot of time exchanging our insights and confirming our findings with one another before coming to a conclusion. The silhouette of the Great Emperor appears to be connected to the various stars in the sky. That is to say that it seems the figure of the Great Emperor has merged with the starry sky. In reality, the stars in the sky are all linked together to form the silhouette of Ziwei the Great. I never imagined Ren Huangyi would immediately see through this key point. Impressive." Around him, many people in the starry sky looked down at Yi Futian. They were clearly astonished by his previous view. Indeed, the conclusion they had come to was immediately pinpointed by Yi Futian. He had immediately seen through the most crucial point. As expected, such comprehension lived up to his reputation. Rumor has it that he was the only person who managed to comprehend the sacred remains of Xinjia the Great Emperor. It seemed that the rumors were true, and he indeed had exceptional talents. When Yi Futian heard what the other party said, he suddenly understood. So that was the case. He was speculating when he said this. In truth, he was not very confident in his speculation. He never imagined that it was actually true. Since even the other party had come to the same conclusion, it should be the case. The silhouette of Ziwei the Great was formed from the starry sky. "Come on up and let's comprehend together," a peerless figure called out to Yi Futian in the starry sky above. His back was towards Yi Futian as he faced the silhouette of Ziwei the Great. His tone was calm, but he seemed to be a high-ranking cultivator. He had an imposing aura. The other cultivators did not mind him. Many people said, "Ren Huangyi and his group, come up and let's comprehend together. Let us see whether we can comprehend the mysteries of Ziwei the Great together." Ning Hua's group swept a glance in the direction of Yi Futian. A cold look flashed past in Ning Hua's eyes. He never imagined that Yi Futian would immediately stand out once he arrived. He was being exalted by the crowd. Many people had high hopes in him. From the looks of it, he had improved immensely in the last few years. Yi Futian could almost pose a threat to Ning Hua. However, Ning Hua did not pay much heed to him. After all, for Ning Hua, Yi Futian had to die. "Many thanks, everyone," replied Yi Futian as he nodded his head slightly. He did not turn down their offer and immediately rose into the sky above and comprehended with the crowd. Yi Futian's group stood beneath the starry sky. Above them was the face of Ziwei the Great. His gigantic face was one with the starry sky. As they gazed up at the face, they discovered that they were minimal. They were as insignificant as grains of sand in the ocean. The solemn aura persisted. The part of the starry sky that Yi Futian was in was tranquil. Very few people were talking. They were all silently looking up above at the starry sky. Even if they could not comprehend the mystery of the silhouette of Ziwei the Great, by just standing there, they could still perceive different things. It was a comprehension that came with their state of mind. These people were all the finest figures of the various realms. Taking those from the Divine Prefecture as an example, many of the core figures of the 18 domain chief manners were present here. Aside from them, there were also some powerful existences from mighty forces, cultivators from the empty divine realm, and top figures of the dark world. In their own respective worlds, they were all powerful existences. They were peerless, and they were renowned far and wide, exalted by the masses. Yet, here, they were no longer the figures who stood at the peak. Before this god, beneath this starry sky, everyone felt that they were tiny. Compared to the entire universe, they were still insignificant. Even though they had cultivated to such heights, they were still unqualified to pry into the secrets of this world. It might be that only in such an environment could they feel this way. Some comprehended the majesty of the great emperor while comprehending the vast starry sky. Yi Futian discovered that although the various cultivators were standing under this part of the starry sky, they were seemingly divided into 3 groups. He was unsure as to whether or not this was intentional. Among these 3 groups, the cultivators of the divine prefecture made up the greatest number of people. The other 2 groups should be the cultivators of the empty divine realm and the dark world. Renhuang Yi, have you heard of the legends of Ziwei the Great back in the day? The Renhuang who had spoken before this asked Yi Futian as he walked up beside Yi Futian. Yi Futian shook his head and replied, I know very little about the great emperor figures of ancient times. Please enlighten me. Legend has it that Ziwei the Great once unified this segment and became its ruler. In this Ziwei segmentum, all living things among the various stars worshipped him. Aside from him, there were a few other great emperor figures in this segment. They each held a position and ruled over their own domain. Ziwei the Great was not an ordinary great emperor. There were great emperor-level figures beneath him, and he was also called the Star Lord of Ziwei. He was known as the Master of the various stars, the cultivator said. This segment was sealed away by Ziwei the Great for countless eons. It might be that it was not like this back in the day. It might have been even larger than this. It is hard to say for sure. Among the stars that merged to form the silhouette of Ziwei the Great, were there previously cultivators on these stars? Yi Futian nodded his head slightly. Great emperor figures naturally also had power levels. Before the collapse of the heavenly path, during the Age of the gods ruled the world. There were surely many existences at the great emperor level back then. It was natural for there to be outstanding figures among them. Ziwei the Great was one of them. He was a Star Lord who ruled over a segment. Shenjia the Great Emperor was also a powerful great emperor figure. Otherwise, he would not have dared to say that the world originally had no paths. He wanted to challenge the heavenly palace and the heavenly path. During that glorious era, when the various gods contended with each other, how many peerless figures roamed the world exactly? Yi Futian imagined that it would certainly be exciting if he could return to such an era. Unfortunately, it was most likely impossible to return to such an era ever again. All right, I will leave Renhuang Yi to your own comprehension, the Renhuang said. Yi Futian nodded his head slightly and did not say any more. He continued to gaze up at the starry sky. A sensation of feeling small welled up inside of him. He attempted to clear his mind. His focus wandered the galaxy. His consciousness seemed to float around, traversing the endless starry sky. Could it be a matrix? Yi Futian thought to himself. However, what sort of matrix could be formed from billions of stars? It would be impossible for him to unravel it. Most likely, all the cultivators here would not be able to unravel it. Probably only great emperor-level existences could use stars to form a matrix. As his consciousness floated in the space, he saw a brilliant light that was exceptionally bright in the starry sky. It was the heavenly scroll in the hand of the great emperor. It appeared mysterious. The great emperor held it in his hand, yet it could not be touched. Naturally, someone had tried to do so before this. It was not just them. Over the countless years, the members of Ziwei Imperial Palace would have certainly tried to do so as well. Hence, Yi Futian did not have any intention of retrieving the heavenly scroll. It was a foolish dream to want to do so. He only hoped to solve the mystery behind the silhouette of Ziwei the Great, or rather the mystery hidden within it. His consciousness wandered the starry sky for a long while. However, he still did not manage to grasp anything. Yi Futian only sensed the vastness of the starry sky, the majesty of the galaxy, as well as how minuscule he was. The heavenly might that lingered in the space seemed to have lasted since ancient times. As he stood there, he could not sense anything else. If he continued doing so, he might have some insights into the world, but it would be impossible to unravel the mystery of Ziwei the Great. As Yi Futian retracted his consciousness, he opened his eyes and sighed inside as he looked at the starry sky as well as the silhouette of Ziwei the Great. He felt that it would be challenging to unravel this mystery. Yi Futian glanced at the others and asked Blind Tai and Fangari, "Have you managed to comprehend anything?" Fangari shook his head and answered, "I only felt as though my lifetime of cultivation is insignificant while being here." On the other hand, Blind Tai said, "If Ziwei the Great truly left behind a sliver of his will, what would it look like if all the stars came crashing down?" Yi Futian looked at Blind Tai with a look of surprise. This fellow had an interesting way of thinking. However, Yi Futian actually could not help but ponder about it. What would it look like if all the stars came crashing down? A world would most likely be destroyed. The entire segment might even be destroyed. Was this the power of Ziwei the Great? As Star Lord of Ziwei, he could control the various stars in the sky. Renhuang Yi, have you managed to comprehend anything? Asked the Renhuang when he saw Yi Futian return from his comprehensive state. Unfortunately, no, replied Yi Futian as he shook his head. The person said, it's nothing. For the past few days, with so many cultivators here, all of us have not had much substantial insight. There have been people who sensed the existence of specific stars that make up the silhouette of Ziwei the Great. However, their findings are still unclear and will most likely not be of much use. Yi Futian looked up at the starry sky. Could he sense those stars? I'll take a look and see whether I can find anything, replied Yi Futian. Thanks for the reminder. This isn't a useful clue, the other party smiled, shaking their head and not paying much heed. Yi Futian closed his eyes once again. His consciousness reached out toward the starry sky, heading towards the stars that made up the silhouette of Ziwei the Great. Based on their conclusion, there might be something among those stars. Yi Futian's consciousness kept ascending. His mind seemed to form an illusory figure that wandered in the sky. His consciousness went to an extremely high place. The gigantic illusory figure of Great Emperor Ziwei became larger and larger. Soon, his consciousness could no longer detect the full image of Great Emperor Ziwei. On the contrary, the light dot which he was approaching was getting brighter and brighter. The star was dazzling as it twinkled. The star grew larger as Yi Futian's consciousness traversed higher and got closer to it. He could vaguely make out land, mountains, and rivers in the star. It was as though it was a real world. Yi Futian was rather shocked when he saw this. Many thoughts went through his mind. Even though he had his speculation before wandering here, it was just his guess. Now that he had verified through observation that his speculation was indeed true, he was still greatly impacted by the reality. This dot of light was indeed a star. Then, were the billions of light dots in the sky above various actual stars? Where were they? After they entered the divine hall of Ziwei Imperial Palace, they were teleported by the matrix to this starry sky. They discovered that they were no longer within the Great Hall but an actual part of the segment. There were countless stars here as well as the illusory figure of Great Emperor Ziwei. However, the star that Yi Futian was looking at was barren. There were no signs of human civilization, just endless continents of deserts. He could not sense the presence of life on it at all. As he stood there, Yi Futian's consciousness experienced tremendous pressure. There seemed to be a formless power in the space that pressed down from the sky. He floated over with his consciousness, but it was extremely unstable. It was as though it would disperse at any moment. Although Yi Futian had come to this star, he still had nothing to show for it. Very quickly, his consciousness retreated from the star, pulling backward as it floated through the endless space. The light from the sky full of stars shone down on him. Their pressure grew greater and greater. Yi Futian's silhouette appeared somewhat blurry, as though it would disappear at any moment. Unbeknownst why, he suddenly felt a strange sensation. In the Void Realm, the 3,000 realms of the Great Path all had signs of the presence of cultivators. In the Divine Prefecture, each continent had signs of human life. How was it that among the billions of stars here, there were actually no signs of human life? Was it possible for special stars, where human cultivators had once cultivated on them, to exist among these endless stars? What would happen if they tried to approach the special stars? Could they reach the stars? Yi Futian's consciousness retracted. He opened his eyes and revealed a pensive look. He knew that he had to be patient. It would definitely not be easy to want to comprehend the secrets of Great Emperor Ziwei. Since Ziwei Imperial Palace had not been able to unravel his secrets even after all these years, it was impossible for Yi Futian and the others to do so in just a short amount of time. Yi Futian looked at the cultivator who talked to him before this and asked, "Has anyone tried to reach these stars?" "They are out of reach," replied the other party. His answer caused Futian to reveal a surprised look. They could sense all the stars in the sky, yet they couldn't reach them. Even though the cultivators were situated in this vast starry sky and the stars were extremely high above them, in the end, there should be a finite distance between the cultivators and the stars. Why was it that they could not reach the stars? Could it be that all these stars existed in an entirely different form than what they appeared? I think most likely Ziwei Imperial Palace has tried to reach the stars before too, the Renhuang commented. Futian nodded in agreement. Futian revealed a contemplative expression as he was puzzled by the phenomenon. Right at that moment, a dazzling divine light poured down from the sky and instantly attracted the attention of all the cultivators. All the cultivators looked in the same direction and saw a silhouette ascended high in the sky. The halo of the great path shone brilliantly around his body. It was a unique radiance. The robe on the cultivator fluttered as he became the center of attention. In the sky, a beam of light shone down and landed on his body. This scene caused the surrounding cultivators to be greatly amazed. Everyone traced the source of the light and discovered that the divine light actually originated from one of the stars in the starry sky. A dazzling light was emitted from the star and was directed at the cultivator. In an instant, the cultivator seemed to be baptized by the divine halo. He became one with the stars in the sky and resonated with the star that shone a light on him. Everyone was shocked by the scene which happened before their eyes. They had been here for days, yet they had not been able to decipher the secrets of the illusory figure of Great Emperor Ziwei. Through their discussion, they had managed to obtain some insights. Unfortunately, their insights were far from allowing them to unravel the secrets of the illusory figure. However, this scene that had just occurred meant that they had reached a huge breakthrough. The cultivators could resonate with the stars in the sky. "It's him!" exclaimed someone. All the cultivators immediately recognized the cultivator who managed to resonate with the star. He was a famous figure from the divine prefecture. He was well known for his exceptional talent. So, he was the first one who unraveled the secrets of the stars. The cultivator dashed upwards with an astonishing speed. It was as though he was rushing towards the star. The divine light of the great path, which shone down from the star, also intensified, engulfing the cultivator in it. It was as though a very powerful force descended from the starry sky and pierced through the heavens. Futian also raised his head and looked in the direction of the cultivator. His heart quivered. Just now, his consciousness also ventured towards one of the stars, yet he discovered nothing from it. How did the other party do this? Could it be that each and every star in the sky was unique? Could it be that some stars could pour down the divine light of the great path to resonate with the cultivator who detected it? Are there special stars? Asked a powerful Renhuang from the divine prefecture towards the cultivator who was floating high in the sky. The voice of the Renhuang penetrated through the starry sky and reverberated in the eardrums of the cultivators. Yes, the other party replied immediately. Find a star which can resonate with you. Among the billions of stars in the sky, some are different. When everyone else heard his reply, they were astounded. This cultivator actually shared his insight with everyone without keeping the secret to himself. Immediately, everyone raised their heads and looked at the countless stars in the sky. Just as the cultivators were regaining their composure, a terrifying dark divine light poured down from the sky in another direction. Under the brilliant starry sky, this divine light, which was as dark as ink, appeared exceptionally striking. It caused everyone's gazes to be shifted in the direction where the dark divine light was. The next moment, this dark divine light descended in a straight line and landed on a figure. This cultivator was from the dark world. He wore a black robe and had a set of deep eyes. He looked at the sky while his robe fluttered. Then, he extended his arms, and his whole body floated up into the sky. His body seemed to be greedily absorbing the light which was pouring down from the sky. Another cultivator had done it. The hearts of everyone trembled. If the first person did it out of coincidence, what did it mean when two people managed to do so consecutively? Everyone had a chance to do so too. Were the secrets of this starry sky finally being revealed? When the crowd saw that two cultivators resonated with the stars in the sky, They all closed their eyes and attempted to do the same. It was as though the two cultivators who had succeeded cleared up a path for the rest of them. The crowd could see hope now. Down below, the other cultivators in the starry sky also raised their heads and looked over in this direction. They saw the divine halos of the great path shining down from the stars in the heavens. Their hearts immediately trembled. Their figures also rose into the sky. It seemed that the teachings of great Emperor Ziwei were contained in the various stars in the sky. Very quickly, the various cultivators arrived here. Their gazes were fixed on the two figures. Intense emotions welled up inside all of them. "Is this a divine relic?" someone mumbled. A divine relic left behind by great Emperor Ziwei was finally found. Did that mean that they would also have a chance of finding another? Right then, Futian also looked at the two figures. Bathed in divine light, the two figures seemed to be inheriting some form of power. It was power coming from the stars in the sky above them. The power contained within the divine halos of the great path should be compatible with the two cultivators. Not just anyone could sense the star containing divine power and inherit the power within it. At the very least, it was definitely not as simple as the crowd imagined it to be. The top prominent figures of various realms had gathered here, yet, up until now, only 2 people had managed to do so. Hence, it would most likely be a dream for others to want to attempt to do so. Futian predicted that only a handful of people would succeed. Would finding a compatible star and resonating with it be that easy? Futian thought to himself. Then, his figure floated in the sky, and he emptied his thoughts. His consciousness once again wandering in the endless starry sky. In an instant, the light of endless stars appeared in his view. It was as though all of them had appeared before him. His consciousness rose high in the starry sky and came before the gigantic face of great Emperor Ziwei. The starry sky seemed to fall silent. It was as though only the sky full of stars existed. Each star shone with brilliant starlight. They seemed ethereal and unreachable. This time, he did not head over towards one star. He had already tried to do so once before this. There was nothing on the star that he had gone to. It was an endless wasteland. It might be because of the star, or it might be his own lack of compatibility. If he tried to visit each star one at a time, how long would he need to try out each star in this vast sky? A few decades? Centuries? He couldn't sense each star in the sky above. Then, how had the 2 people before this managed to do so? Was it a coincidence, or was it inevitable? Futian did not head over towards the stars. He instead wandered the starry sky, aimlessly floating about. He did so purely to see whether or not he could sense anything. After all, it was impossible that he would discover the mysteries of the stars after having just arrived. The 2 who succeeded had been here for several days before managing to communicate with the stars in the sky and drawing the divine light into them. It was naturally impossible for him to immediately do so upon arrival. Although he did not know who those 2 cultivators were, they were certainly the most outstanding figures among those present. In the starry sky, Futian's illusory figure floated about aimlessly. He walked around in space, occasionally stopping to observe the various stars, comprehending the vast, mysterious place. Gradually, his consciousness completely entered into a Zen state. He forgot about everything in the outside world and even forgot about his own being. There was no noise, no stray thoughts. It was as though his own being had followed his consciousness here. After floating around in the sky for a very long time, Futian still did not manage to grasp any pattern. His consciousness continued to wander around the starry sky. He came beneath a star. The star radiated frightening starlight, and it was shining brightly. It was the star that had resonated with the cultivator from the divine prefecture below. What was different with this star? The illusory figure of Futian, formed from his consciousness, stood there, observing quietly. However, he still could not make out anything unique about this star. He then floated towards another star. Although the next star radiated dark divine light, it appeared to be a star hidden within the dark world. It was actually difficult to sense its presence. This caught Futian by surprise. What was off about it? He began to observe the area of the segment around this star. Suddenly, He sensed an extremely powerful divine might of the great path. It came pressing down on his consciousness. His expression changed slightly. Gradually, he found it difficult for his consciousness to withstand this pressure. His consciousness dissipated and disappeared without a trace. Huff! Futian exhaled deeply. His eyes revealed a sharp divine light. In the instant that his consciousness dissipated, he seemed to have discovered something. As he looked up in the direction of the star, Futian's figure dashed up into the sky and shot straight towards the high heavens. Many cultivators around Futian stared at his figure and could not help but reveal strange expressions. What was he doing? Could it be that he actually wanted to search the various stars? Futian came to a region higher in the sky. There were no signs of humans here, and the other cultivators were also not here. Divine light shone from his body as he sat down cross-legged. The divine halo of the ancient tree circled his figure. A silhouette immediately flew out from within his body. Futian's spiritual soul had actually separated from his flesh and floated high into the sky. His spiritual soul was bathed in divine halos, seemingly containing the will of the great emperor. His physical body sat cross-legged underneath the starry sky motionlessly. Blind Tai and Fangari also came here, protecting his physical body. Fangari raised his head and peered at Futian's spiritual soul that had left his body high in the sky. He revealed a strange look. What was Futian doing? Blind Tai's expression also twitched as he raised his eyebrows slightly. He similarly did not understand what Futian was doing. However, knowing Futian, he must have a reason for doing so. Futian might be onto something. In the sky above, Futian's spiritual soul replaced his previous consciousness. He once again came to the place his consciousness was before. An intense pressure still landed on him, acting upon his spiritual soul directly. However, at that moment, his spiritual soul radiated with brilliant divine halos. It was extremely dazzling and was indestructible. He stared intently at the sky above. Many dark stars appeared in the heavens. These dark stars seemed to form a dark silhouette that appeared in the starry sky. This dark silhouette had a pair of dark eyes that were staring at him. Right then, Futian felt as though he was being stared at by a god. Rumble. Futian's spiritual soul was sent flying back into his physical body. His heart was pounding. As he opened his eyes and stared up at the starry sky, there was an intense look of awe in his gaze. He seemed to have discovered another secret of the starry sky. His figure that was sitting cross-legged got up. Futian's gaze seemed to pierce the endless space as it swept across the sky. His silver hair danced frenziedly. Behind him, Fangari and Blind Tai were shocked. What was going on? So there is more than one great emperor, he exclaimed internally. Futian was astonished. He seemed to have unraveled the mystery of this part of the starry sky. In the endless starry sky above, there were actually silhouettes of other great emperors. However, the silhouettes of these great emperors were eclipsed by the silhouette of great Emperor Ziwei. Futian recalled what the Renhuang had said to him before. Legend has it that great Emperor Ziwei ruled over the segment back in the day. He was also known as Star Lord of Ziwei. Beneath him, there were other great emperor-level cultivators. With the silhouette of great Emperor Ziwei present, the other great emperors were hidden in the vast starry sky. It seemed that back when great Emperor Ziwei sealed off the segment, it was not just him who left behind something in this starry cultivation court. The other great emperors under him also left behind their powers to be inherited. Only after doing so did they leave the segment and participate in the war of the heavenly path. That meant that, right now, the two cultivators had sensed the power of the great emperors. Starlight descended upon them, and they were now inheriting the power of the great emperors. Futian suddenly wondered whether or not they had seen what he had seen. Or had they resonated with the stars by chance? He would not know the answer, only the two cultivators themselves would know. However, discovering this secret was crucial for comprehending the mystery of the starry sky. Futian's figure went over to the cultivation court of one of the two cultivators. Then, just like before, his spiritual soul left his body and floated into the endless starry sky. He glanced around the star that was shining down on the cultivator. As expected, he once again saw a divine silhouette. The star that shot down divine light contained unparalleled power that resembled imperial glory. Was the star an imperial star? How many imperial stars were there here in this endless starry sky? His spiritual soul wandered over to other locations, no longer observing the cultivation of the two outstanding renhuangs. They could sense the existence of the imperial stars and obtain the teachings of the great emperor. They were certainly also extraordinary and monstrous figures who stood at the peak. Although the most powerful figures from various realms were gathered here, there would only be a handful of figures like these two renhuangs. Beneath the starry sky once again, Futian sat down cross-legged. He sensed the heavenly might coming from the sky above. His expression became stern. It would certainly be challenging to sense the presence of an imperial star. He wanted to find other imperial stars in the starry sky. Right now, Futian speculated that these imperial stars were crucial in unraveling the mystery of Great Emperor Ziwei. If he managed to find these imperial stars, he would most likely be able to discover the secrets in this segment which was ruled by Great Emperor Ziwei. Streaks of divine lights surrounded Futian. His spiritual soul left his flesh and was enveloped by the divine light of the Great Path. The halo of the Great Emperor was faintly radiating. It was dazzling. His spiritual soul wandered in the endless starry sky. When Futian's spiritual soul reached a spot, he paused, and his consciousness scanned the starry sky as he was surrounded by divine light. Soon, Futian was completely immersed in the starry sky. He had forgotten about everything else. He was fully engaged in sensing the starry sky. It was vast, majestic, quiet, and barren. Countless stars twinkled in the starry sky. Futian's consciousness drifted past many of them. There were innumerable stars in the sky. Attempting to locate the imperial stars among them was no different from finding a needle in the sea. It was a tough task. However, Futian noticed a pattern when comprehending the cultivation of the other two renhuangs just now. The imperial stars were each surrounded by a small segment that formed a silhouette. The silhouettes were similar to that of Great Emperor Ziwei. If Futian could locate another silhouette amidst these endless stars, he would most likely be able to find an imperial star. However, even locating a silhouette was an arduous task in this vast starry sky. How did the other two renhuangs do it? Aside from Futian, many cultivators in this starry sky cultivation court had come to the higher sky. All of them were eager to discover the secrets of this starry sky after they witnessed the success of the two cultivators receiving the starlights. However, even though there were many cultivators around, they appeared exceptionally tiny here. After they dispersed to various directions, their existences were insignificant. They were like grains in the ocean. Moreover, it was challenging for the cultivators to communicate with the stars in the sky like the other two cultivators did. Nevertheless, everyone wanted to give it a try. The division of day and night did not exist in this place. Nobody paid heed to the passing of time either. Another day had passed without anyone noticing. The spiritual soul of Futian was still observing the starry sky. He was determined to locate a small-scale segment that could form the silhouette of a human figure. Finally, he found a region. Some of the stars in this region were stars that formed part of the silhouette of Great Emperor Ziwei. However, if he looked at these stars in isolation, he could faintly make out the silhouette of another figure. Even though the figure was roughly traced out by the stars, Futian could sense the solemn might emanating from it. The face that appeared in Futian's mind had a majestic temperament. Was this figure the great emperor that used to rule this part of the Ziwei segmentum? Futian wondered. After such a long time, he finally managed to identify a silhouette. Futian's discovery made him respect the two cultivators who succeeded even more. Their achievement in discovering the silhouettes of the great emperors was indeed groundbreaking. This made Futian realize that there were many talented people in the world. Many of them were as exceptional as Futian himself. After finding the silhouette of the great emperor, the next step would be locating the imperial star. Based on Futian's previous observation, the imperial star should be within the silhouette of the great emperor, so it would be somewhere in this region. Yi Futian's consciousness wandered to one of the stars. He found nothing. Then, he moved on to the next star. Similarly, he detected nothing. This star was similar to the ones he sensed before. They were all barren stars without any trace of living beings or the path left by the great emperor. Yi Futian tried again and again. However, all his attempts resulted in failures. After a long while, he had gone to all the stars in this region, yet the outcome was demotivating. He found absolutely nothing. Floating in midair, Yi Futian gazed at the starry sky with a blank expression. There was no imperial star. How was this possible? Did something go wrong? Before this, he had explored the imperial stars that resonated with the other two cultivators. By right, he should be on the right track. However, the reality was right before his eyes. He had failed. None of the stars in this region was the one he was looking for. It was as though the imperial star did not exist at all. What exactly went wrong? Yi Futian thought to himself. He was puzzled. He didn't understand what went wrong. Was there a hidden star? Yi Futian recalled the situation he witnessed. If there was a hidden star, how could he detect its existence? Yi Futian looked at the two renhuangs. In the distance, the two beams of starlight were still shining on both of them. It was as though the star lights would shine forever. Besides that, the path that each renhuang cultivated matched the divine power of the star that shone on them. This meant that the path of the cultivator and the path of the star surely resonated. When Yi Futian thought of this, the divine light of the great path circulated in his body. The world tree emitted a rustling sound in the life palace. Instantly, the vines of the ancient tree enveloped his body, emanating a divine halo. At the same time, countless wills appeared on Yi Futian's body of the great path. Behind him, both the sun and the moon shone brightly as he was surrounded by stars. Myriads of divine phenomena radiated from his body simultaneously. His consciousness was still locked onto the region in this segment. He was sensing his surroundings quietly. A moment later, twinkling starlight slowly lit up in a direction. It was as though a star suddenly appeared in the void of the starry sky. Buzz! Yi Futian's consciousness pounced towards the direction of the starlight. His entire body glowed even more brilliantly as divine light surrounded him. He could sense the star clearer now. The star grew brighter and brighter, as though a power was born from it. The power was communicating with Yi Futian across the sky. The two formed a resonance. He did it. Yi Futian's heart was palpitating wildly. He was one step away from success. This imperial star was about to be unraveled by him. Yi Futian's consciousness swept out toward the stars. Gradually, he began to be able to see one star that shone with incomparable brightness. An unimaginably powerful golden storm swirled around it. This terrifying storm seemed strong enough to shatter anything it touched. As his consciousness went out toward that star, the figure of the great emperor up in the sky gradually began to grow clearer. Its entire body was suffused with dazzling light, and golden radiance swirled around its majestic form. It gave off a sensation of boundless dominance. Although this imperial figure had appeared earlier, the feeling it gave off was completely different from back then. The same imperial image felt completely different at different times and looked different as well. It was becoming more and more frightening. It was as if it was truly a golden god with a radiance that could dazzle the entire world. Boom! At that moment, Yi Futian forcefully broke away from it. His consciousness had not made contact with the star. On the contrary, he had been pulling away from it. He opened his eyes. His heart was beating wildly, but there was a thoughtful look in his gaze. Would the inheritance that the great emperor had left behind be there only once and disappear, or would it exist there forever? He did not know, but his body was without equal, and his combat skills were practically unmatched. There were no opponents who could stand before him. Even inheriting the power of the great emperor would only be of limited use toward his advancement. It would not give him a way to discover how to transcend. The moment before, he suddenly had a thought. The power of the imperial star would be most suitable for blind Tai. How would it be if he were the one to inherit this power? It would certainly produce a transformation in him. Blind Tai had been betrayed and blinded back then, returning to the village with regret and sorrow. The master had healed him and helped him recover. But an injury like the one he had received was certainly still there. Moreover, Blind Tai's enemy was here today. Mo Ku of the Demon Cloud was no weaker than him. If he wanted revenge, it would be quite difficult. If he inherited this power of the Great Emperor, he would have the opportunity to break through to the 9th tier. In addition to gaining the inheritance, he would be able to fight with the Demon Cloud. At that moment, Fangari and Blind Tai did not know what Futian was thinking. They had just seen brilliant radiance appear upon his body and thought that he had discovered something. However, Futian had suddenly pulled back, and everything seemed to return to the way it had been before. This made a look of surprise appear on Fangari's face. Blind Tai's face twitched as well. Although he could not see what was going on, he could sense it all very clearly. "Uncle Tai," they all heard Futian call. Blind Tai was stunned. He looked up to where Futian was, his eyebrow twitching. He looked very hesitant. "Come here," called Futian. Blind Tai did not understand, but he still moved over to where Futian was. He stood by Futian's side and asked, "What is the matter? I am going to pass on everything that I just understood to you. Why don't you try and do this, Uncle Tai?" Futian said to him telepathically. Blind Tai had still not fully grasped the meaning of Futian's words. He saw a beam of light appear from Futian's forehead, which then entered his own forehead. Suddenly, everything that Futian had just realized was transmitted into Blind Tai's mind. It was like he had seen it all himself. As long as he followed the path that Futian set before him, he would find it. After he saw all this in his mind, Blind Tai naturally understood what Futian had come across. He could already take the inheritance of the Imperial Star, but at the critical moment, Futian had given it up and called him over. What did this mean? He was giving the inheritance of the Imperial Star to him. "No," said Blind Tai, flatly refusing him. The inheritance of the Imperial Star was extremely precious. He could not accept it. "Uncle Tai, this thing is essential for cultivators, but I do not lack such things. Here in the Starry region, my only target is to inherit the power of Great Emperor Ziwei. The master of this Imperial Star must have once been the servant of Great Emperor Ziwei," said Futian to him telepathically. "Moreover, don't you want to prove yourself worthy of reaching the peak of the Renhuang Plain? Don't you want to gain the ability to take revenge for your blinding?" Blind Tai was moved when he heard Futian's words. This was indeed his obsession. Moreover, he knew clearly that what Futian had said made a lot of sense. Futian already had the inheritance of the Great Emperor. He was the only one who had been able to comprehend the corpse of the Shunjia Great Emperor and forge a perfect divine body from it. And if Blind Tai were able to obtain the inheritance of a Great Emperor, he would have a great chance of achieving his vengeance. "Don't waste time. Whether or not you can make contact with the Imperial Star will depend on your skill," continued Futian. "I will continue to search for other Imperial Stars. Many of them must exist within this starry region." Blind Tai finally nodded. Since his eyes could not see, his other senses were more perceptive than most other cultivators. Moreover, he had great hope that he would succeed. He sat down cross-legged, feeling out toward the path where Futian had been searching before. With Futian helping him to broaden his horizons, it would be much easier. This was definitely an opportunity that Futian had given to him. Futian saw Blind Tai gripping his hands tightly. "Uncle Tai, do not be conflicted in your heart. Relax." He understood that his state of mind must be in turmoil. If that were the case, it would affect his senses. Blind Tai nodded and relaxed his fists. He gradually fell into a state where he forgot himself. He freed himself from conflicted thoughts. He did not think about anything like that. Futian stood off to the side, seeking the positions of other Imperial Stars. If he could find all of them, could he unravel the inheritance that Great Emperor Ziwei had left behind? Moreover, he wanted to see if Blind Tai could complete this step. If he could do it, he would allow other people to see if they could do it when he found more Imperial Stars. Fangari, who was standing off to the side, did not know what was going on. The two people were communicating telepathically. After all, the matter of the imperial star was too important, and there were many cultivators there in the starry dimension. They did not want to let anyone else hear and create bad ideas in their minds. But compared to Blind Tie's previously downcast expression, solemnity and gratitude were written on his face now. Given the scene before him, he was able to guess a little bit of what had happened. He looked over at Futian. In his heart, he thought that Four Corner Village had not looked at the wrong person. He had not chosen wrong, and neither had his master. This cultivator who had come to the village from another realm was the true future of Four Corner Village. Perhaps he could even transform the village. Time passed bit by bit. All the cultivators were searching through the starry sky. After a while, Futian found another starry region where he saw a faint figure. This had taken a lot less time than before. Clearly, after gaining a bit of experience, Futian was starting to become familiar with this. And at the same time, not far from Futian, incredibly brilliant light of the Great Path was flashing all over Blind Tie's body. Up in the sky, a star was growing brighter and brighter, becoming extremely radiant. It became golden, as if it was made entirely of gold. Beams of light shone down, all of them shooting towards where Blind Tie was. In the next instant, everyone could only see a single beam of light pierce down from the starry sky. Stars began to fall as well, falling directly toward Blind Tie. Boom! An extremely brilliant divine radiance covered Blind Tie's body. Although he could not see, he could sense an incomparably powerful divine figure standing in the sky like a god of war. A golden army covered it, and it was filled with a sense of infinite power. It was breathtaking. He had succeeded. Futian had opened the way, and he had followed his path. He could now feel the existence of the imperial star. Powerful golden light pierced through his body. As he was bathed in that light, Blind Tie could feel his body filling up with unimaginable power. Afterward, Fangari's heart was beating wildly. And he was not the only one. All of the people from Four Corner Village's hearts were racing. They went over to Blind Tie. The cultivators of the Heavenly Mandate Academy went over as well. This was a man who always protected Futian. Father. Fang Huan went over to Fangari's side. There was a look of surprise in his eyes and a little bit of doubt. This is the opportunity that Futian gave to this guy, Fangari said to him telepathically. Fang Huan's heart trembled slightly. He had directly given the inheritance of the Great Emperor to Blind Tie. Previously, Fangari and Blind Tie had volunteered to protect Futian. They had not had any intention of cultivating. They did not want to come to this place to gain anything, they just wanted to protect Futian. However, Blind Tie had inherited the power of a great emperor. When one planted flowers intentionally, they would not explode. When one unintentionally planted willows, they would spring to life. Blind Tie, who had not wanted to cultivate, had received a cultivation opportunity that most people could only dream of. And at that moment, the cultivators from other realms were all staring at Blind Tie. Someone said, "Who is that?" The vast majority of them did not know Blind Tie. It seemed that he had come with Futian. Why had he suddenly received the inheritance of the great emperor? How had he done it? Chapter 22-27, Another Imperial Star. Soon, many people had realized that Blind Tie was the cultivator who had protected Futian before. After all, many people knew Futian nowadays. When he had gone up to the highest point in the starry sky, all of them knew who he was. That is the man who protected Futian, someone said outright. Why is he the one who received the inheritance? Many people looked surprised at this. Futian's previous pronouncement had shocked them all. As soon as he went up, they had guessed that Emperor Ziwei was scattered through the stars in the heavens. And Futian was the only one who had been able to comprehend the corpse of Emperor Shenjia. Thus, if Futian received the inheritance, perhaps they would not have been so shocked. But now, it was Blind Tie who had received, someone whose eyes could not see, someone who had once protected Futian. Could it be that his senses are stronger because he is blind? Someone guessed. No, said someone looking up into the sky. Futian asked him to come up there. He had seen with his own eyes what Yi Futian had done there. After that, Yi Futian had asked Blind Tai to come up. "What do you mean?" someone beside the Renhuang who had spoken asked, a look of surprise on his face. "That is impossible. Who would give the inheritance of a great emperor to someone else? Moreover, was Yi Futian really so supremely powerful? Not only had he discovered the deep secret of the imperial star, but he had given it over to someone else. This was too shocking. There were so many cultivators there who wanted to find the imperial stars but could not do it. They certainly would not give that chance to someone else." After speaking, they could not help but look back up to Yi Futian. They saw that he was not far from Blind Tai. He was cultivating up there in that field of stars. He was looking at Blind Tai, a smile upon his face. Although he had opened the way for him, Blind Tai had still needed to rely on himself to sense the imperial star, which was not a simple matter. Previously, the power of the two cultivators who had discovered the imperial star was the same as the imperial star's power that they had come in contact with, which is why they produced a resonance with it. Thus, Yi Futian had let Blind Tai inherit the power of this imperial star since his own power made him well suited to discovering that imperial star. Anyone else would not have been guaranteed success. These were his main reasons for doing this. But Uncle Tai himself had only been able to do this because of his extraordinary understanding. Many cultivators flashed over there towards where Blind Tai was floating. This scene made Yi Futian and those with him frown slightly, and there was a strange look in their eyes. They looked upon the people coming towards them warily. What did this mean? No one had dared disturb the two people before. So why were they coming towards Blind Tai now? Yi Futian naturally saw this. He knew that the two cultivators who had made contact with the imperial star before were exceptional, and their backgrounds were quite extraordinary. Thus, no one dared to have any ideas about disturbing them. Now, Blind Tai had made contact with an imperial star. Were they getting ideas this time? He temporarily stopped trying to make contact with a new imperial star and turned his gaze to the people who were coming. He could see that they were continuing forward towards where Blind Tai was. He could see that many cultivators were below him, all of them staring at Blind Tai. Fangari and the others were guarding the perimeter and watching in all directions. Seeing that the others were still continuing forward, they could not help but release some of their power. Fangari said, "He is cultivating, so I hope you will not disturb him. If you have something to say to him, why don't you wait until he is finished and then say it?" "I want to ask, how did you make contact with this star?" a Renhuang asked Blind Tai in a loud, clear voice. Fangari frowned. These people clearly did not have good intentions. When they saw that Blind Tai had inherited the imperial power, they had gotten ideas. They wanted to know the secret of how to make contact with the imperial stars. Boom! At that moment, a divine light shone down upon Blind Tai. His body moved slightly as he turned to face the man who had spoken. A terrifying aura spread out from him as a divine hammer appeared up in the sky, filled with world-destroying divine power. The divine hammer was bathed in the radiance of the imperial star, and its light filled the heavens. A terrifying burst of power shot out from within it, pressing everything down. All the Renhuangs in the area around it felt their hearts begin to beat faster. This was not right. He was bathed in the radiance of the imperial star. It was like he could draw power out of it. In that case, since Blind Tai was already at the 8th tier with a perfect divine wheel, how many people there would be able to compete with him? Boom! An even more terrifying power seeped out. Everyone could see the divine hammer growing larger until it covered the sky. It was like a heavenly hammer of stars, with enough power to destroy an entire realm. It floated in the air above everyone's heads. The Renhuang who had spoken could feel his heart racing, and a frightened look came over his face. If that hammer fell, would he be able to withstand it? Finally, terrifying divine radiance burst out of the hammer and crashed down from the sky, crushing an entire area and splitting the imperial star into two parts. Dazzling radiance flowed out from the starry sky, cutting through the world of stars and falling not far from where all the Renhuangs were standing. A wild windstorm blew towards them, surrounding them with the power of the Great Path. Still unable to withstand the terrifying storm, everyone retreated into the distance, their clothes flapping about them wildly in the wind. After a while, the storm finally disappeared. Everyone looked up and saw that the hammer was gone as well. Blind Tai was still bathed in the light of the imperial star and cultivating. He had turned and was no longer facing them. Everyone's hearts beat faster. They naturally knew that the hammer had merely been a threat and that it would have actually struck them. If it had, probably not even one of them could have withstood it. After making contact with the imperial star, Blind Tai had been able to directly use its power. This put him in an unassailable position. No one could steal his inheritance, and he would not succumb to anyone's threats. It seemed like anyone who had ideas about doing anything to him would find that task impossible. The cultivators all left the area. They would have to rely on themselves to be able to sense the imperial stars. Futian relaxed after he had witnessed this scene. He looked over at Blind Tai. Divine light was falling from the imperial star in the sky. This light contained divine power within it. That was why he had been able to wield that hammer and threaten all those heroes. Futian flashed away, returning to his previous position. When Blind Tai had made contact with the imperial star, he had felt the existence of yet another imperial star. He sat cross-legged once again, gathering his spiritual energy. He returned to a state of forgetting himself. This time, many people were all watching him. Many of them guessed that Blind Tai had only been able to make contact with the imperial star because of Futian. So now that Futian was continuing to cultivate, they naturally wanted to watch and see if he could do it again. His senses entered into the endless starry sky. The stars outlined a vague image. Above this vague image, two hands were holding something, but he could not see clearly what it was. This time, Futian once again unleashed the power of the Great Path. The light of the Great Path flowed, however, he did not feel an imperial star like he had before. He could not produce any resonance. Could it be that his cultivation was not well suited to this imperial star? As he thought of this, his aura began to boil as he increased the power of the Great Path to the next level. However, he still could not sense anything. This made Futian frown. According to his previous experience, he should not be able to make any mistakes. Since he had found the image of the emperor, the imperial star should be right there. What kind of power did this imperial star hold? Futian remembered that he still had a kind of power that he had not unleashed. Suddenly, endless guqin strings appeared in the air, and a stormy melody swept out from them, becoming guqin notes. At this moment, they seemed to form rhythmic sorcery. Rhythmic sorcery? A surprised look came over Futian's face. This imperial star had something to do with rhythmic sorcery? As he thought of this, the strings of the Great Path trembled, forming music. It was the song of the lost divine. A powerful storm of rhythmic sorcery covered his body of the Great Path. Suddenly, the image in the sky gradually grew clearer. He could once again see the figure of an emperor clearly. It was holding something. It was holding a guqin. His consciousness was able to perceive the emperor's existence. This imperial star was in the shape of a guqin, and a terrifying rhythmic sorcery storm was upon it. Could he inherit it? Of the people here besides him, no one was skilled or powerful at rhythmic sorcery. They probably could not connect with this imperial star. He retracted his consciousness, and a thoughtful expression came over him. He would be a bit careful when it came to the inheritance of a great emperor. There was the potential to create a powerful entity here. If he inherited it himself, he could increase his strength, but Futian felt that would be a little pitiful. He looked down. It seemed like only one of the people that he knew had the chance to inherit this imperial star. But the two of them were not close. Thinking of this, Futian flashed downward. Over there, a beautiful young woman was standing calmly. She looked surprised when Futian came over to him. She did not understand why he was doing this. "Greetings, goddess," said Futian. This goddess was, in fact, the goddess Taihua. He had an idea. Of course, he could not lightly give the inheritance of a great emperor to someone he did not know. That would be up to the goddess Taihua. Renhuang Yi, what pointers do you have for me? Goddess Taihua asked Futian. Yi Futian observed her expression. Goddess Taihua seemed to wear a look of caution. Back then, they had fought each other before. During the Donghua banquet, the two of them had fought using divine melodies. Yi Futian also knew that Ning Yuan, the domain chief of the Donghua domain, was ambitious. He wanted complete control over all the forces in the domain. He meant for Ninghua and Goddess Taihua to be married. As for what Taihua Mountain thought about this, Yi Futian was unsure. However, the Donghua domain chief's manner was destined to be Yi Futian's enemy. He naturally did not want to see the forces of the domain chief's manner grow stronger. It can't be considered pointers. Back during the Donghua banquet, I exchanged notes with Goddess over songs. I thought we were quite agreeable, so I wanted to get to know Goddess better. In the future, if we have the opportunity, we could discuss music and learn from each other. What do you think, Goddess? Yi Futian suggested. Goddess Taihua's beautiful gaze revealed a strange look. She looked seriously at Yi Futian as thoughts surfaced in her mind. Yi Futian was currently considered to be in his prime. During the Donghua banquet, he had displayed his caliber and was well known in the Donghua domain, gaining fame overnight. Later, when he went to the Shangqing domain, he also became famous there. His talent was not less than Ninghua. Now, he was approaching her. His goal for doing so was enough to cause Goddess Taihua's imagination to run wild. Far off in the sky, Ninghua was looking over in this direction. His gaze was extremely sharp. His figure also floated over as he stared at Yi Futian. Was Yi Futian already acting so presumptuous? It was not just him. The members of the Donghua domain all knew the relationship between the three parties. They could not help but feel intrigued. The beautiful gazes of Qin Qing and the other goddesses of divine palace of fluttering snow revealed strange looks. Was Yi Futian trying to undermine Ninghua? Was he purely trying to make Ninghua look bad? Renhuang Yi, you are too kind. With your attainments, I feel that I have nothing worth teaching you, answered Goddess Taihua. She naturally also sensed that the atmosphere around her was off. She kept a distant aura as she said this. Yi Futian also understood Goddess Taihua's intent. She was turning him down. Goddess Taihua did not want to have anything to do with him. If that was the case, he did not need to reveal his intention. The other party's attitude was already made very clear. All right. Sorry to have disturbed you, Goddess, said Yi Futian as he bowed slightly. He then turned and left. All throughout this exchange, his etiquette had been thoughtful. Goddess Taihua felt strange as she looked at his silhouette. She did not know what Yi Futian was thinking and why he had suddenly approached her. Many of the members of the Donghua domain were puzzled. With Yi Futian's level of cultivation, he couldn't be trying to court her. Why had he suddenly approached Goddess Taihua? What was his intent? Right then, they saw Yi Futian return to where he was high in the sky. He closed his eyes and silently cultivated. Not long after, divine light descended upon Yi Futian from the heavens above. Instantly, countless gazes were drawn over towards him. They all revealed looks of astonishment. That is, in the starry sky, the various cultivators felt their hearts thumping. He had communicated with another imperial star? Many people looked up at the imperial star in the sky. They could faintly make out a divine silhouette. For a moment, an astonishing storm of rhythmic sorcery appeared around Yi Futian's figure. The sound of a guqin could actually be heard. The frightening rhythmic sorcery swept out. The cultivators in the starry sky could sense its beat. A guqin seemed to appear in the starry sky. When Goddess Taihua saw this scene, her face turned pale instantly. She seemed to have caught on to something. Aside from her, all the cultivators from the Donghua domain also realized why Yi Futian had approached her just now. Before this, the blind Renhuang, who followed and protected Yi Futian, inherited an imperial star, said Qin Qing. Her heart was palpitating wildly as she looked at Jiang Yueli and Chu Hanshi beside her. The two were also staring at her with trembling hearts. Did such a monstrous figure really exist? From the looks of it, Yi Futian is indeed talented, Jiang Yueli whispered. He can locate the imperial stars, and he chooses to let others inherit the teachings from them. Before this, Yi Futian has most likely been given the chance to inherit the imperial star to the blind Ren Huang. As she said this, she was astonished by his act. Giving up the teachings of the great emperors so that others could inherit them? He had been so casual about it. Yi Futian also seemed to have the ability to easily locate an imperial star. Both points were enough to make their hearts tremble. Seemingly thinking of something, their gazes shifted towards the direction of Goddess Taihua. The imperial star that Yi Futian was communicating with right now was passing on the way of rhythm. They then thought of the fact that he had wanted to give up the teachings of an imperial star to someone else. Then, why had he come searching for Goddess Taihua, who was similarly proficient in rhythmic sorcery and cultivated the divine melody? The answer was on the tip of their tongues. They also noticed that Goddess Taihua's facial expression was becoming extremely interesting to look at. She seemed somewhat pale. Clearly, they understood that Goddess Taihua had missed an opportunity just now. Yi Futian had actually thought of giving up the teachings of the imperial star to Goddess Taihua. He was not trying to court her. He was clearly testing Goddess Taihua's attitude before giving her a great fateful encounter. However, such an encounter had just slipped away from her. Goddess Taihua's distant attitude had caused Yi Futian to give up on his previous thought and instead inherit the teachings of the imperial star himself. They wondered how Goddess Taihua was feeling right now. Right then, Goddess Taihua had extremely complicated emotions. She wondered why Yi Futian had chosen her. Why would he give away such a great fateful encounter to a stranger like her? From the way Yi Futian acted just now, he had the intention to do so. Otherwise, he would not have come looking for her and then returned to inherit the teachings of the imperial star. She was extremely conflicted inside at the moment. Even the top Renhuangs would waver and would not be able to calm down quickly if this occurred to them. What did a fateful encounter with the great emperor signify? Especially for cultivators like her, it was too important. Moreover, it was an imperial star that had the way of rhythm that she was compatible with. Did she regret her decision? Of course, she regretted it. How could she not regret it? Those were the teachings of a great emperor. It could be said that no one else was feeling more conflicted than she was at the moment. Nearby, Ninghua's expression turned extremely ugly when he saw Goddess Taihua's expression change. He naturally also understood what had transpired. He looked up at Yi Futian. How did he manage to do it? It was not just Ninghua. Everyone wanted to know the answer to this question. As they witnessed Yi Futian bathing in the divine halo, the cultivators walked over towards where he was and looked at the silhouette in the sky. If communicating with one imperial star was a coincidence, suppose he managed to do so with a second imperial star? In this starry sky, there was actually someone who could locate imperial stars and casually communicate with them. The crowd naturally knew what this meant. Chapter 22-29, What the Ziwei Imperial Palace was thinking about. None of the cultivators wanted to fight Yi Futian anymore. They had already learned their lesson from Blind Tai. When one was basking in the divine light of the imperial stars, one could use the energy from that divine light. If they tried to attack him at such a time, they were bound to lose miserably. Even though they didn't intend to attack Yi Futian, they remained on guard in the area surrounding Yi Futian and kept their gaze fixed on him. Everything that Yi Futian had done had too great an impact. He was now the only one who could communicate with two imperial stars, and he had even given away the enlightenment of one of them. This made everyone else guess that Yi Futian was very likely to be someone who could also comprehend a third or even a fourth imperial star. They might even have the chance to decode the secrets of this starry sky. If all the imperial stars were found, would it possible to find what Ziwei the Great left behind? Because of this, the way everyone else looked at Yi Futian had changed. This young man held the key to possibly unraveling the secrets of this place. But it was going to take quite some time to comprehend the imperial stars. Of course, Yi Futian knew that all the other cultivators would start getting some ideas about him, but he couldn't be bothered with them. As long as he continued to find imperial stars and communicate with them, he would end up attracting the attention of others anyway. There was no way of hiding that from all these cultivators. But none of them would do anything to him because everyone in this place wanted to unlock the secrets of Ziwei the Great. As he quietly basked in the divine light of the Imperial Star, he felt like he had stepped onto the star itself. An incredible burst of rhythms appeared and tapped out rhythm patterns in his mind. Out of all the zither tunes that Yi Futian had heard of before, the only one that could compare with these intense rhythms was the divine melody Taihua of Taihua Mountain, reminding him of Taihua Goddess. It was a pity that the Taihua Goddess didn't want to interact with him and kept a distance from him. Since that was the case, he wasn't going to give his precious enlightenment away for nothing. He had originally thought that if the Taihua Goddess intended to get close to him and become friends with him, Taihua Mountain could ally with him. With the support of the Taihua Skylord, they would have yet another powerful source of strength. But of course, all that was just his wishful thinking earlier. It wasn't worth mentioning anymore now. As he continued to bask in the divine light, Yi Futian's mind and body could feel a very heavy rhythm weigh on him. The body of that great emperor seemed to be imprinted in his mind, and a frightening song of the great path emanated from his body. It was as if the great emperor had left behind a powerful will here. A scene seemed to appear within Yi Futian's mind. In the midst of the great burst of rhythms, a heavy weight shattered everything. All the stars in the sky were destroyed and became nothing but dust under the weight of the rhythms. The pulsating reverberation of the notes carried the most terrifying power in the world, one that could destroy everything. Is this what it looks like when the way of rhythm reaches its peak? Thought Yi Futian to himself. Everywhere around him had been completely destroyed. Even the vast sky of innumerable stars had been turned into powder from the impact of the rhythms, as if the whole world had fallen apart. It was a truly terrifying sight to behold. Yi Futian was completely immersed in that mode, and his senses had invaded the Imperial Star as if he was lying in the midst of the burst of rhythms. As the divine light from above continued to shine on him, the divine power of the rhythms washed over Yi Futian's body, causing the storm of rhythms around him to become more and more frightening. As time went by, the cultivators surrounding him also walked away. They could keep standing here and waiting. There were other Imperial stars, so they wanted to try their luck with those. After one day, yet another legendary figure had successfully established communication with another Imperial star. He was the envy of all the cultivators. 5 Imperial stars had already been taken. Several high-level cultivators from various factions of power were gathered in one area. They looked up at the sky, and one of them said, "That was the 5th one." If each Imperial star represents one great emperor, that means that the things that 5 great emperors left behind have all been discovered. According to legend, how many great emperors were under Ziwei the Great back then? Asked another in a low voice. 8, replied one of them. According to legend, 8 great emperors, including Tiankue and Wansu, assisted Ziwei the Great and ruled over the segment. They were incredibly powerful and were certainly one of the most powerful of their time. Ziwei the Great was also a great emperor who wielded great power. If each Imperial star truly represents one great emperor as guest and the Imperial stars that represent 5 great emperors have already been found, that means there should be 3 Imperial stars left. Only 3 left, someone murmured. There were fewer and fewer opportunities left. But of course, even finding these Imperial stars were a problem in themselves. At the same time, many other high-level cultivators were still gathered outside Ziwei Imperial Palace. Some of them sat by themselves, while some of them were chatting with one another. To people of their level, the time that passed over the last few days was very short and was only enough for a brief meditation. Ziwei Imperial Palace had arranged places for all of them to rest, but since it was rare for all of them to be together, they wanted to exchange pointers on cultivating the great path with one another. "I wonder what's happened inside. Where have they been sent to?" murmured one of the high-level cultivators. The best cultivators from each place went in, so if Ziwei the Great has really left any incredible secrets behind, I'm sure people with their ability would be able to find it. Yes, that's possible. But will the Ziwei Imperial Palace? One of them wondered if Ziwei Imperial Palace would pull any stunts on them. "Don't worry. I have sent them to where Ziwei the Great used to cultivate and have left them on their own. We will not interfere in any way," a melodious and surreal voice said from the Ziwei Imperial Palace. It sounded like everything that was happening was within his control. The high-level cultivator who spoke earlier gave the representative from Ziwei Imperial Palace an apologetic smile and said, "Palace Lord, I hope you don't take offense. I was too narrow-minded in my thinking." The Palace Lord of the Ziwei Imperial Palace didn't respond. He sat cross-legged in the middle of the Ziwei Imperial Palace with several cultivators in front of him. The Palace Lord of the Ziwei Imperial Palace asked, "How are things?" "5 imperial stars have already been discovered and understood," replied one of them. "These are truly the best cultivators the outside world has to offer. I hope that they will be able to complete everything successfully," said the Palace Lord of the Ziwei Imperial Palace. He didn't seem surprised at all and sounded like everything was within his control. All these years, the Ziwei Imperial Palace had also been trying to understand the secrets of Ziwei the Great. However, they had not been able to find what Ziwei the Great had left behind. Now that cultivators from all lands had come forth, they hoped that the things that Ziwei the Great had left behind could be discovered. Nobody believed more strongly than them that Ziwei the Great must have left something behind because they were from the Ziwei Imperial Palace themselves. None of the cultivators among the stars knew anything about what was happening in the outside world, and they certainly had no idea what the Ziwei Imperial Palace was thinking about. The cultivators who had received enlightenment from the Imperial Stars completed their cultivation one after another. Futian stopped as well. The divine light around his body faded, and he stopped comprehending the power of the Imperial Star. Also, he felt that the power from this Imperial Star could last forever and wasn't something that would end after one session of comprehension. That meant that other people could continue to gain power from this Imperial Star later. These great emperors had left all this power behind back then, probably in the hope of helping their descendants. This also probably meant that all these years, there should have been several people just like himself, coming to the Ziwei Imperial Palace, discovering the existence of Imperial Stars, and gained enlightenment. The moment he completed his cultivation, he saw a group of high-level cultivators walk towards him. Everyone was looking at him from all directions. Nobody else before this had been treated this way, not even Blind Tai. Futian was the only one. But of course, he knew why too. He was the only one who had found 2 Imperial Stars and had given one away too. After finding out about such a thing, there was no way the other cultivators would just let it be. "Renhuang Yi, I have heard much about how incredibly gifted you are. I didn't expect you to have such a powerful comprehension ability even in this place. You were the one who found 2 Imperial Stars, right?" one of them asked him directly. Futian looked at the other party and just nodded without hiding anything from him. He couldn't deny anything even if he wanted to. None of the cultivators here were stupid. Chapter 22:30, One appearing after another. Everyone had a slight shift in their eyes and a tremor in their hearts when they saw Futian nod. After that, someone else asked him directly, "Renhuang Yi, could I ask how you managed to do that? Do you have any tips to share?" Futian shook his head and replied, 5 Imperial Stars have appeared, and I'm sure everyone has already discovered some of their secrets. Finding an Imperial Star in the sky relies solely on one's senses. As long as you sense the existence of a great emperor and get a sense of where the Imperial Star is positioned, then you can use your subconscious to communicate with the Imperial Star, where you can will the power of the Imperial Star to pour down and baptize you in it. Everyone hummed to themselves for a moment after hearing what Futian said. Even though they all knew this, very few people had been able to pull it off. But when Futian explained it, he made it sound like it was something straightforward. The Imperial Star I sensed earlier was a rhythm star. Anyone who specializes in cultivating rhythm can try releasing your way of rhythm and see if you create any sort of resonance with that Imperial Star. Then you can start communicating with that Imperial Star, Futian continued. He sounded gentle and elegant as he seemed to be sharing with them everything he knew. He didn't look like he was trying to hide anything from the other cultivators. "Renhuang Yi, are you saying that more than one person can understand this Imperial Star?" One of them had realized what Futian was implying with these words and couldn't help but look slightly surprised. That would mean that all of them had a chance at comprehending the Imperial Star. "That's right." Futian nodded. "According to the feeling I got earlier, that should be the case. The existence of the imperial star can cleanse those who cultivate and help one to metamorphosize. I believe everyone had roughly seen where the imperial star is, so all of you can give it a shot. One of them looked deep in thought. If that's the case, then doesn't that mean we could also unleash our senses towards the imperial star when you are communicating with it? I've not actually tried that before. But if you really rely on others to first start communications with the imperial star, then try to come in later, wouldn't you end up getting swallowed up by the imperial star instead? Its energy might just gobble you whole, remarked Futian. Many others pondered this possibility seriously. It seemed possible as well. There's probably some of the will of the ancient great emperor of Ziwei segment left behind on the imperial star, so when communicating with the imperial star, you're really trying to resonate with that bit of will left behind. If both sides are unable to resonate well, I would think that the chances of getting swallowed instead are very high, so I hope everyone will consider this method very carefully first, Futian continued. After hearing what he said, everyone's expressions became more serious than before. Could they only rely on their own strength, after all? But that didn't seem to be the case either. Before this, Futian had allowed Blind Tai to receive the power of the imperial star. If Renhuang Yi is willing to help, would things be easier to manage? Like what happened to your friend earlier, a Renhuang standing further off spoke up. The look in many of their eyes began to burn excitedly. This was indeed what many of them were thinking about. In theory, that might be the case. But I still stick by what I said. It really still depends on one's ability to perceive and strength of perception and whether or not the power your own body has cultivated can resonate well with the imperial star. Otherwise, I would think that you won't sense a single thing, continued Futian. In that case, could I ask if Renhuang Yi is willing to help all of us to sense the position of those two imperial stars? Asked another person. That's right. Since you've already inherited the power of this imperial star, then could you also help us to seize this very rare opportunity? Yet another person chimed in. It seemed like all of them were hoping to use Futian as a shortcut to gain the powers from these imperial stars. Well, that's theoretically possible. Futian smiled faintly and looked at the person who last spoke. But I'm not familiar with any of you, so what good does it do me if I do this? After all, the power of these imperial stars is so precious, so it's only natural that I would give it to someone close to me. I'm sure all of you can understand that. Renhuang Yi, what do you want then? Asked one of them. I want someone to kill the vice chief of the Donghua domain chief's manor. Ninghua. As long as I can sense any imperial star, I will help him, said Futian with a smile on his face. Some distance away, Ninghua's pupils constricted slightly when he heard these words. His gaze was chilly as he glared straight at Futian from afar. Murderous thoughts surged through his body. Both he and Futian wanted to kill each other, but some issues prevented them from doing so directly. So now, Futian was hoping to make use of someone else to get rid of Ninghua instead. If anyone here were willing to kill Ninghua, that would be someone who dared to go up against the power of the Donghua domain chief's manor. So even if this person made it out of this place, he would become sworn enemies with the Donghua domain chief's manor. In that case, not only would Ninghua die here, but the Donghua domain chief's manor would also have several new powerful enemies. Why go through so much trouble? Just take him down. Isn't that easier? Said Ninghua icily from a distance. If anyone wants to do that, then you will be treated the same way as Ninghua, Futian responded. The meaning of his words was clear. If anyone tried to kill him, then the assailant would also be part of this deal. Besides, I heard from everyone else here that Ziwei the Great had 8 great emperors under him. If this corresponds to 8 imperial stars, it means that there are still 3 more imperial stars that have not appeared yet. Doesn't everyone want to find the last 3 imperial stars to see if we've got a chance at deciphering the secrets of Ziwei the Great? Futian went on, revealing exactly what everyone was thinking about. 5 of the 8 imperial stars had already been found, so it was natural for them to look forward to the remaining 3. If they were really able to obtain the things that Ziwei the Great had left behind, the rest was insignificant. Ziwei the Great had cultivated in this cultivation space. The great path will that the 8 great emperors under him had left behind was already so incredible. What about the things that Ziwei the Great left behind himself? Surely they were great beyond compare, right? All of you can consider the conditions I offered earlier. Then, we'll join hands in decoding the deep secrets that Ziwei the Great left behind in this starry space. Yi Futian continued speaking. Many of them had their eyes focused on Yi Futian and had different thoughts going through their minds. We'll do it then, said one of them. It was a cultivator with an extraordinary aura around him. The rest didn't raise any objections, so someone else said, in that case, Renhuang Yi, why don't you see if you can communicate with the other imperial stars? Thanks for your understanding, everyone. Yi Futian nodded. Every single person here was the best from their region, and their magnanimity was above the average person. Besides, all of them were here for only one thing, to comprehend what Ziwei the Great had left behind. The only thing that everyone wanted to do in this place was to unravel the secrets of Ziwei the Great. Yi Futian stood beneath the starry skies and looked up. He closed his eyes and sent his consciousness into the vast skies. There were only 3 left, so they might be hard to find. Just as Yi Futian had thought, it took him a really long time before he finally spotted the image of another great emperor. He found another one in the tiny segment he was observing. Yi Futian joined up the location of this star to the position of the other 5 stars and looked at their formation. He noticed that they seemed to be at different parts of Ziwei the Great's body but seemed to form a unique sort of shape. He wasn't sure if this formation was connected to anything. What sort of power would be in this imperial star, thought Yi Futian to himself. He unleashed an immense amount of great path aura to sense exactly where that imperial star was. When the other cultivators saw that Yi Futian had unleashed his great path aura, they all turned to look at him. Was he about to discover yet another imperial star? Just then, divine light suddenly poured down from a different location and shone brilliantly. All of them turned to look in that direction instead, and their hearts trembled violently. Someone else had been able to locate an imperial star, and he had done it before Yi Futian did. That meant that as long as Yi Futian successfully communicated with the imperial star he had sensed, 7 imperial stars would have been found, and they would be left with just one last imperial star. Then everything that the 8 great emperors under Ziwei the Great would have surfaced. Would Yi Futian be successful this time? Chapter 2231, The Last Star. This time, Yi Futian did not hide the power of the Great Path. He also unleashed his detection to its utmost limit as he charged towards the silhouette of the Great Emperor. Soon, the vague silhouette of the Great Emperor gradually became clearer. However, it was surrounded by layers of turbulent air. Yi Futian's heart skipped a beat. It was actually Yi Futian was surprised. What he detected this time was a domineering demonic qi. Was there a demon monarch among the 8 great emperor-level figures who served under Great Emperor Ziwei? He continued to explore. The silhouette of the Great Emperor became clear to him. As expected, even though the Great Emperor appeared human, he seemed demonic. One could tell from a glance that the Great Emperor was not a human cultivator. The demonic qi churned, and Yi Futian could vaguely sense a flaming storm of demonic qi. An enigmatic star twinkled. Suddenly, a terrifying demonic might swept towards Yi Futian. It was as though countless demons appeared before his eyes. In an instant, his consciousness crumbled and was pushed back into his body by the might. Such an overbearing might, Yi Futian mumbled as his pupils contracted. He opened his eyes and looked at the heavens above. His gaze was exceptionally sharp. He didn't continue trying to communicate with the star. Instead, he turned around and looked in another direction. The cultivators from the Heavenly Mandate Academy who came together with him were standing there. Third brother, Long Chen, Jun, and Zifeng, come over here, said Yi Futian. They immediately revealed strange expressions. Despite that, they still dashed over in a flash. This imperial star is a demonic star. I will pass on all that I have experienced to you. Try to sense it and see who can communicate with the imperial star first. If you manage to do so, you can proceed to receive the baptism of power from the imperial star, instructed Yi Futian. He also did not know who would be the most suitable candidate. He could only let them attempt together to see who could sense it first. Although the others would still have a chance to sense it after Yi Futian had done so, there was still one more imperial star that had yet to be found. He was prepared to seek out that imperial star first. If he had time later, he would then inherit the power of these imperial stars and receive baptisms of power. Younger brother, what about yourself? Jiyu Dongliu asked. Third brother, there is still one imperial star that has yet to be discovered, Yi Futian replied. Jiyu Dongliu immediately understood his intention. He nodded his head and said, all right, we will give it a try. You go on ahead and find that last imperial star. Replied Yi Futian as he nodded his head. Then, his divine consciousness passed on all that he had sensed to the others. As to who would manage to sense the imperial star first, it depended on their fortune. Of course, if they had time later, they still had opportunities to do so. It was just that they did not know how much time Ziwei Imperial Palace would give them. That being said, they had been in this space for quite some time. Ziwei Imperial Palace was rather generous, actually allowing them to comprehend the power of the imperial stars here. Nevertheless, that did not seem to be an issue. The power of the imperial stars was eternal. They could not take the imperial stars away from this space. Even if they were baptized in the power of the imperial stars, it still did not affect Ziwei Imperial Palace. After Yi Futian gave his instructions, he left the region. Jiyu Dongliu and the others sat there and comprehended. In the starry sky, the cultivators who saw this scene were envious. Only the people close to Yi Futian received such treatment. They clearly knew that Yi Futian had already sensed the presence of another imperial star. However, he had not comprehended its power for himself. Like before, he had passed on this opportunity to others. Since this imperial star had been discovered, it seemed that there was only one last imperial star that had yet to be found. From the looks of it, Yi Futian planned to find where this last imperial star was. As expected, Yi Futian's silhouette appeared in another location. He continued to comprehend the various stars in the sky. If all 8 imperial stars were found, would the mystery of Great Emperor Ziwei be unraveled? In the endless starry sky, the stars twinkled and shone. Yi Futian's senses wandered the starry sky. With his previous experience, he was confident that if there existed a small segment in the silhouette of the Great Emperor, he should be able to find it. His consciousness took the form of his silhouette as he floated around the vast starry sky. He traversed across countless regions of stars as he searched carefully. Right now, Yi Futian was completely immersed in his search. Everything in the outside world seemed irrelevant to him. The gazes of many people were fixed on Yi Futian's silhouette. It seemed that the monstrous figures from various forces had high hopes in him. Even if it wasn't them, as long as Yi Futian could locate the final imperial star, it was considered a breakthrough for all of them. The cultivators of Heavenly Mandate Academy, as well as Four Corner Village, had even higher hopes in Yi Futian. They wondered whether or not he would find the last imperial star. Time passed by gradually. Yi Futian was not the only one searching for the imperial star. Many other cultivators were also doing so. However, no one had managed to find it yet. In the part of the starry sky that Yi Futian was at, time seemed to have come to a halt. He sat there motionlessly. Just like that, a long time passed. Yi Futian retracted his consciousness and opened his eyes. He let out a long breath and felt somewhat tired. Having cultivated to his level, he was naturally not physically tired. However, he was mentally drained by the process. Finding the presence of the imperial star in this vast starry sky was extremely draining mentally. He glanced over to a nearby spot. His third brother, Jiyu Dongliu, and the others were comprehending. However, they had yet to communicate with the imperial star. Yi Futian hoped that someone among them could manage to do so. After resting for a while, Yi Futian continued to sense. The stars in the sky were endless. He naturally would not be disheartened for not being able to find the imperial star. Everything remained the same. He continued to be in his state of zen. Just like that, a day passed. On this day, brilliant starlight shone down on where Jiyu Dongliu and the others were. The starlight landed on Jiyu Dongliu's figure. Right then, frightening demonic qi emanated from his body, causing Jiyu Donglio's handsome face to appear demonic. Long Chen, Jun, and the others shook their heads and smiled bitterly. They never imagined that, as demonic beasts, they had actually failed to communicate with this demon monarch imperial star. Instead, Jiyu Dongliu had managed to do so. However, back in the day, Jiyu Dongliu had obtained a great fateful encounter in the demon realm. He possessed the teachings of a demon monarch. Hence, it was not strange that he had communicated with the star now. When the other cultivators in the starry sky saw this scene, they could not help but lament. Futian had helped another good friend of his. Now, there truly was only one last imperial star left. Goddess Taihua also glanced over here. She had a complicated look in her eyes. With Futian's help, she would have had a very high chance of communicating with the imperial star that contained the way of rhythm. However, it was now impossible for her to ask for Futian's help. What was gone was gone. She would not go and ask for his help. Futian wouldn't necessarily agree even if she did. There is only one last star left, someone mumbled as they looked at the starry sky. That's right. There is only one left. He has already been scanning for it for a day. I wonder whether or not he will find it soon, pondered a cultivator to the side as he looked up into the starry sky at Futian, who was quietly sitting there. Futian was completely in his state of zen. He should be able to find the last imperial star, right? After all, he had already found 3 of them. Time passed slowly. Everyone was waiting. Some people had tried searching for the imperial star themselves, but the last imperial star had yet to appear. Even Futian had not found it. After 3 days, Futian retracted his consciousness once again. He felt his heart stir. His gaze was not as calm and confident as before. How many times had he failed? For the previous imperial stars, he had not taken so long to locate them. Yet, this time, he had not come across anything after a long time. How is this possible? Lamented Futian as he frowned. His consciousness swept over the various stars, yet he still could not find it. Why was that? Was this imperial star hidden deeper within space? It wasn't just him. Other people had not managed to find it too. It seemed as though the last imperial star was the hardest to find. Chapter 2232, A Ray of Hope. Were there truly 8 imperial stars? Futian thought to himself. Even he began to suspect this. For several days, his consciousness had scanned the sky of stars, but he still could not locate it. The few monstrous figures, who managed to communicate with an imperial star before this, similarly had not found it. This aroused suspicion in Futian. His figure turned around and glanced in other directions. He saw that many people in the starry sky were looking at him. They seemed to be waiting for him to find the last imperial star. I scanned the starry sky but have not found the final imperial star. Back then, under Great Emperor Ziwei, are you certain that there were 8 Great Emperor-level figures? Futian asked the crowd loudly. Legend has it that the 8 glorious emperors under Great Emperor Ziwei were 8 Great Emperor-level figures. There should be no mistake in that. The imperial stars that have been communicated with seem to prove this point as well. Before this, the imperial star in that direction should belong to Great Emperor Tiankuei, someone said as they pointed in one direction. The person seemed certain. This caused a twinkle in Futian's eyes as he nodded his head slightly. If that is the case, the last imperial star is mostly hidden deep within space. It won't be easy to find, Futian stated. Everyone, let's try hard together. The crowd responded as they nodded their heads. Then, Futian continued to sit down cross-legged with his eyes closed. Divine light circled around his figure as his consciousness floated over towards the starry sky. He began to continue his search for the imperial star. The ethereal starry sky was vast and boundless. Futian was even more serious than before. He focused all his energy on scanning the sky. This imperial star was too crucial. When the 8 glorious imperial stars appeared, all the pieces would fall into place, and they might be able to trigger the secret left behind by Great Emperor Ziwei. Hence, this time, Futian was very focused. The starry sky was vast and appeared very quiet. In this quiet starry sky, it was as though time did not flow. Futian spent an even longer time to sense the entire starry sky this time around, passing over each region of stars. However, he still came out empty-handed. It was not just him, it was the same for the other cultivators. No one managed to find the last imperial star. Futian sat underneath the starry sky. His ink-black eyes stared at the starry world. He could not help but be suspicious. Although there were 8 glorious emperors under Great Emperor Ziwei, was it possible that one of them had not left behind their power to be inherited? If that was the case, could the remaining 7 imperial stars be sufficient to unravel the secrets of the starry sky? He couldn't help but glance at the locations of the 7 imperial stars. He unleashed powerful detection as he closed his eyes. The entire starry sky appeared in his mind, with the 7 imperial stars shining brightly. In Futian's life palace, he developed a world with an endless starry sky to match the locations of each imperial star. He wanted to see whether he could deduce any pattern from the imperial stars by doing so. After a long while, he still made 0 discoveries. He retracted his consciousness and once again opened his eyes. The starry sky remained vast and mysterious, like a riddle that would never be solved. It was full of unknowns. Other cultivators who were similarly attempting to find the last star also encountered dead ends like Futian. Everyone present in this starry sky felt helpless. They were out of ideas. All their probing and searching came to a halt. Futian was the person with the highest chance of succeeding among all of them. However, even he was similarly feeling helpless. From the looks of it, they were still far from being able to unravel the secrets of the starry sky. Futian gazed at the starry sky and the illusory silhouette of Great Emperor Ziwei. All the illusory figures of the other great emperors formed part of the silhouette of Great Emperor Ziwei. Were they somehow related? However, Futian still didn't discover anything even after staring at the silhouettes for a long time. You still can't find anything? Someone asked Futian. Futian didn't turn around. He merely shook his head quietly. His gaze was fixed on the sky above. He said in a low voice, "I can't find it. It is as though it never existed. I have tried a few times to no avail." Everyone fell silent when they heard his words. Even Futian said that he couldn't locate the last star. It was most likely truly hard to be found. The others would have an even harder time trying to locate the last star. Could it be that the secrets of the starry sky would remain unfathomable even with all the monstrous figures from various realms gathered here? If that was the case, the best inheritance they could get was the power unleashed from communicating and resonating with the few imperial stars. As for the secrets of Great Emperor Ziwei, they would remain hidden in this endless starry sky for future generations to discover. If we simultaneously communicate with all the imperial stars found and make the divine lights fall from the stars, would it help to unravel the secrets? Suggested someone. This suggestion caused many people to reveal strange expressions. Was this idea worth a try? "We can try," said a cultivator who had resonated with one of the imperial stars. "Since we can't find it with other ways, there's no harm trying it," seconded another cultivator who had also resonated with an imperial star. It seemed like many of them agreed to try out this method. Futian glanced at them and then nodded in agreement. Since they were all out of ideas, they could only attempt whatever was possible. Immediately, Futian, Blind Tai, Jiyu Dongliu, and the others went to the imperial stars that they had communicated with, respectively. The other cultivators also took their positions. This time, they began to communicate with the imperial stars in the sky together. Not long after, divine light shone down from the heavens. 7 consecutive beams of divine light shone down at the same time. For a moment, the entire starry sky was lit up. It was extremely dazzling to behold. It was as though 7 pillars of divine light had descended and were holding up this starry world. Futian was bathed in the divine light of one of these imperial stars. At the same time, he observed the other locations. The 7 beams of divine light did not interfere with one another, as though there was no connection between them at all. The starry sky also did not show any signs of response. Everything seemed normal. The other cultivators observed the changes in the starry sky. They saw the starlight flowing, but it did not appear to have any pattern to it. After some time, Futian stopped communicating with the imperial star and retracted himself from that state. As he looked at the starry world, he felt a sense of helplessness. He still had not obtained anything. Throughout all these years, the cultivators of Ziwei Imperial Palace had most likely failed in many attempts as well. Right now, Futian was certain that the cultivators of Ziwei Imperial Palace had also resonated with the imperial stars here. As for how many stars the latter could establish a connection with, he did not know. However, they were most likely also exploring how to unravel the secrets left behind by Great Emperor Ziwei. Unfortunately, up until now, no one managed to unveil the secrets yet. They had attempted many methods to no avail. Futian's pupils turned exceptionally bizarre as he stared at the stars in the sky. He could see the starlight flowing, forming a star chart. The starlight flowed towards where the 7 imperial stars were. It was as though the 7 stars were 7 points of focus that were endlessly absorbing all the starlight. Futian revealed a strange expression. Observing from the outside seemed to give off a different sensation than when he was among the stars. The vast star chart seemed to have some sort of unique pattern, yet it felt as though it could not be traced. However, right then, Futian felt a ray of hope. Right at this moment, a figure floated towards Futian. The figure was a maiden with outstanding temperament and appearance. She wore a purple long dress, and the hem of her skirt fluttered. She looked like an ethereal goddess. Purple light twinkled in her eyes as she stared at Futian. "Are you observing the starry sky?" the maiden in the purple dress asked softly. Futian nodded. "My name is Luo Su. I cultivate songs and rhythm. I am also a successor of the divine melody like you. I am from outer violet heaven of the divine prefecture," the maiden introduced herself. "Perhaps, Renhuang Yi and I can be friends." Futian looked at the maiden. Outer violet heaven was naturally a top force in the divine prefecture. However, he knew very little about it. This female Renhuang had a pair of clear and bright eyes. She gave off a dependable vibe. Moreover, Futian was somewhat surprised that she would actually take the initiative to approach him. He understood what she wanted. Since she was proficient in songs and rhythm, she could only be here for one reason. Before this, quite a lot of cultivators intended to approach Futian for the same reason. However, Futian warded off all those people with the condition that the person who received help from him had to help him to kill Ninghua. After all, no one was willing to kill the vice-chief of the Donghua domain chief's manor for the sake of a fateful encounter. Moreover, it was hard to say whether they had the ability to kill Ninghua. If they ended up being targeted by the vice-chief of the Donghua domain chief's manor instead, it would be disastrous. Why would Luo Su think that he would agree to her request? However, she indeed came at the perfect timing. Luo Su explained, "Before this, I have sensed this imperial star, but I was still missing something. If Renhuang Yi is willing to help me, I'm sure that I'll be able to resonate with the star very quickly. Then, Renhuang Yi can observe the pattern of the 7 stars as an outsider. It might help you to have new discovery and locate the 8th imperial star." She continued, "Of course, if Renhuang Yi has other conditions, you may voice it out as well. I'll do it as long as it's within my capabilities." Futian took a good look at this beautiful female Renhuang. Luo Su's calm and sincere attitude made him feel comfortable around her. Before this, he intended to pass the teachings of the imperial star to Goddess Taihua. In reality, he was using it as a chance to get closer to Taihua Mountain and form good connections with them. However, Goddess Taihua's cold attitude caused him to abandon his plan. Now, Luo Su had proactively come forward. She was also a successor of the divine melody. There was no reason not to help her. After all, for Futian, there was no harm in doing so. If he could forge a friendship with a top force, he was more than willing to do so. "You know that I am proficient in the divine melody?" asked Futian. "How could I not tell the lost sound of the great path, the rhythm of the song of the lost divine?" replied Luosu as she smiled. Yi Futian nodded and said, "All right. If that is the case, I am willing to be friends with you." As he said this, divine light shone from his glabella and shot towards Luosu's glabella, burrowing straight into her mind. Luosu did not stop him from doing so, allowing the light to enter her mind. She seemed to have a faint realization as she smiled at Yi Futian. She bowed her head slightly and said, "Many thanks, Renhuang Yi. I will head over and give it a try." "All right," replied Yi Futian as he nodded back at her. Luosu floated upwards, her purple dress fluttering as she went off. Her detection swept out towards the starry sky. Not long after, in the starry sky above, starlight descended, and powerful rhythmic sorcery surrounded her figure. The various imperial stars in the heavens resonated. "So fast," commented Yi Futian as he revealed a look of astonishment. It seemed that Luosu was not lying. Before this, she was almost able to communicate with the imperial star. With Yi Futian's guidance, she had managed to do so in a very short amount of time. The 7 stars gathered as Yi Futian stood observing from below. This time, the star chart seemed even more complete. Was this a divine matrix? Yi Futian thought as he gazed at the star chart above. There was flowing starlight and the 7 silhouettes of the great emperors. Yi Futian was most likely the only one who could see the silhouettes of the 7 great emperors. The rest of the cultivators could only see the divine halos emitted by the imperial stars. As for the cultivators immersed in the divine lights, they would probably be able to sense the silhouette of the great emperor they formed a connection with. Yi Futian's senses were fully immersed in the starry sky. He seemed to become one with the stars. His consciousness flowed with the starlight. Gradually, he noticed that the flowing starlight and the dazzling silhouettes of the great emperors were all facing the same direction. The image of the entire starry sky seemed to appear in Yi Futian's pupils. The image even appeared in his mind. "They are facing the silhouette of great Emperor Ziwei," Yi Futian said as his heart pounded. He felt as though he was beginning to discern a pattern. The 7 silhouettes of the great emperors were all facing the silhouette of great Emperor Ziwei. If so, that should also be the case for the 8th silhouette. The 7 silhouettes of the great emperors were at different locations. However, they were each at the center of a region. Yet, it felt as though something was missing. What was missing? Yi Futian's mind raced. The 7 silhouettes of the great emperors were facing the silhouette of great Emperor Ziwei. Where was the 8th silhouette? He began to search the starry sky. He did not know where the location of the last silhouette of the great emperor would be. It should match the star chart and the positions of the other 7 silhouettes of the great emperors. Time passed. The 7 cultivators remained as they were, causing the positions of the imperial stars to be clearer. At the same time, this allowed Yi Futian to more easily sense the presence of the silhouettes of the great emperors. Unsure as to why, the cultivators in the starry sky actually believed that Yi Futian would most likely be the one to find the 8th imperial star. This had nothing to do with his identity or his ability. It was purely because Yi Futian had performed the best so far. Since he performed the best, he naturally had the highest chances of success. Yi Futian seemed to be using the crudest method to determine the location of the silhouette. However, even so, he still had not managed to find it after a long time. This made even the others suspicious. Could it be that the 8th imperial star truly did not exist? After a long while, even Yi Futian became restless. He retracted his consciousness. His vision gradually returned to normal. He sighed internally. The starry sky was too vast and mysterious. He could not solve its mystery. The star chart had exceeded his abilities. "I can't solve it," Yi Futian said to the cultivators who were all staring at the starry sky. In reality, everyone present had their own agenda to pursue. However, they were unified by the same goal now, which was to unravel the secrets of great Emperor Ziwei. "Are we really all out of ideas?" Someone sighed and lamented softly. Great Emperor Ziwei was a great emperor from the past. What exactly was his intention for leaving behind this starry cultivation court? Could it be that the teachings of the 7 imperial stars are the only thing being stored here? How about the heavenly scroll that great Emperor Ziwei is holding? What does it mean? When Yi Futian heard the person's words, his gaze turned around slowly and stared in the direction of the heavenly scroll that the silhouette of great Emperor Ziwei held in his hand. He was momentarily stunned. Then, he looked in other directions. At this moment, Yi Futian's heart quivered uncontrollably. The heavenly scroll. Yi Futian's heart trembled as his gaze was fixed on the heavenly scroll in the hand of the silhouette of great Emperor Ziwei. Before this, some cultivators attempted to unravel the secret of the heavenly scroll, but all of them had failed. Some of them tried to retrieve it, but it was even more futile of an endeavor. Why must the teachings left behind by the great emperors be stored within a star? Yi Futian exclaimed internally. All of them seemed to have been caught up in the wrong line of thought. It was true that there were 8 great emperors under great Emperor Ziwei. However, the teachings of the great emperors might not necessarily have transformed into the imperial stars. Yi Futian might have found it. Yi Futian drifted in the direction of the heavenly scroll that was held in the hand of the great emperor. The heavenly scroll seemed to have been transformed by the starlight as well, appearing elusive and untouchable. Yi Futian's consciousness glided towards the heavenly scroll, surrounded by the divine light of the great path. Just as he communicated with the imperial stars before, he wanted to see if the same method could be used to communicate with the heavenly scroll. However, the heavenly scroll was still covered in endless divine brilliance, quietly resting in the hand of the figure that was Ziwei the Great, without the slightest change. The cultivators in the starry sky had seen Yi Futian's action, and a surprised look crossed their faces as their eyes continued to focus on the heavenly scroll. Everyone knew that Yi Futian was trying to solve the mystery of the starry sky and wanted to find the 8th imperial star. But why did he gravitate toward the heavenly scroll? Had he discovered something? Emperor Yi, someone in the starry sky asked, is there any secret in the heavenly scroll? Yi Futian's eyes were still fixed on the heavenly scroll. He said to the others while his back was turned, the 8 great emperors under Ziwei the Great have found 7 imperial stars. The 8th imperial star does not seem to exist in the starry sky. My guess is that all 8 great emperors didn't need to transform the power of inheritance as imperial stars. Why can't it be transformed as the heavenly scroll? He did not conceal anything from the others. All the cultivators were in the starry sky, and everyone could see everything he was doing. He couldn't hide anything, and he didn't want to hide anything either. Anyone who could uncover the secret of Ziwei the Great's inheritance would have to rely on their own abilities, fair and square. You mean that this heavenly scroll might be the inheritance left by the 8th great emperor? Asked another. This is just a speculation and has not been confirmed. Yi Futian responded, we can try together and see if we can unlock the mystery of the heavenly scroll. Very well. Hearing Yi Futian's words, all the cultivators flickered their way in the direction of the heavenly scroll, releasing their own consciousness. They each explored the secret of the heavenly scroll, trying to see if they could produce any resonance with it. The 7 cultivators who were communicating with the imperial stars also looked there and seemed to have some thoughts. Yi Futian glanced at them as he drifted towards higher ground and said to them, can you please continue and let me observe some more? I feel that there is something else missing, and these 7 imperial stars are the key. The 7 cultivators didn't say much when they heard what Yi Futian had to say. They continued to communicate with the imperial stars, trying to induce the divine light to descend. Yi Futian continued to observe the starry sky map, the positions of the 7 imperial stars, and the direction that the imperial shadow was facing. His eyes were unusually bright, and in his mind, the starry sky was spinning as a picture seemed to start emerging. This picture of the starry sky evolved on its own, but Yi Futian could detect a sense of pattern within it, which quickened his heartbeat. He tried it just now, and not just him, but all the other cultivators had tried as well. There was no way to unlock the mystery of the heavenly scroll. This heavenly scroll seemed to exist in a surreal space and could not be pried. It seemed that something else was still missing. Everyone, Yi Futian was in the air and looking at the 7. Could you please stop for a moment and change your position to communicate with the imperial stars? Jiyu Dongliu, Blind Tai, and Luo Su were the first to listen to him. They stopped communicating with the imperial stars. After that, the other 4 cultivators also stopped and moved towards Futian. One of the Renhuang in black asked, "Why change the position? The place where the heavenly scroll is located may be the place where the 7 stars converge, so I have an idea, and I hope you can try it out with me. As for whether it will work or not, I cannot guarantee," said Futian. When the other 4 heard what he said, they did not say anything but were willing to work with him. One of them said, "How to change the positions?" Futian looked at the space below the heavenly scroll as 7 rays of brilliance fell from him, landing on 7 locations. Then, he assigned each of the 7 people as they went to the position assigned. Even though 4 of them were extraordinary cultivators in their own right, at the moment, they were willing to listen to Futian this one time. There was no loss even if they failed, because if they succeeded, they could unlock the mystery of the starry sky. Therefore, all of them were hoping that Futian would succeed. "We can start now," Futian looked at them and said. The 7 closed their eyes and began to communicate with the imperial stars, as they were familiar with the drill by now. Soon, above the firmament, there were divine lights of the great path descending, and the divine light of all 7 imperial stars began to fall, connecting with them. This time, they were not standing directly beneath it but at an angle. The divine light seemed to cross and change positions. However, under the shocking gaze of many, the 7 divine rays of light actually finally stopped at the same point. 7 stars converging. The heart of those who were in the distant starry sky skipped a beat. This sight was an absolute wonder. At this moment, they had a feeling that perhaps Futian was right. Because the place where the 7 stars were converging just happened to be the palm of Ziwei the Great, the location of the heavenly scroll. The 7 divine lights fell on the heavenly scroll, and a magnificent dazzling sight appeared from the heavenly scroll. The rays of divine light passed directly through the scroll and landed on those 7 figures simultaneously. Therefore, an amazingly splendid sight now appeared under the stars. At this moment, the pages of the heavenly scroll began to turn, and infinite characters were floating out from the scroll, spreading to the endless starry sky in an instant. Countless divine lights shot into the sky, illuminating the starry sky world. The heavenly scroll is open. Everyone's hearts were beating quickly. Futian was right. He had found the inheritance of the 8th great emperor. This volume, located in the most conspicuous position, was also the most difficult inheritance to decipher. Futian was indeed a God-given genius. He had deciphered the heavenly scroll, and who knows what changes would happen to this starry sky world. "Look there," someone exclaimed. They saw that when the 7-star divine light passed through the heavenly scroll, it floated towards that 7 figures with infinite characters, descending directly upon them. At this moment, the divine light on the 7 was even more dazzling and radiant. Could it be that what was hidden in the heavenly scroll was the true inherited ability of the 7 imperial stars? The hearts of all the cultivators were beating wildly. If so, this was probably the only opportunity, the time when the heavenly scroll was opened. Futian. Someone's attention went to Futian. He gave this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to Luo Su, a cultivator from Zixiao Domain of Divine Prefecture. The inheritance of the great emperor was given away like this, which made others felt quite sorry for him. And Goddess Taihua, who saw all this played out before her, felt disquieted in her heart. An emperor-level inheritance was given to Luo Su? This opportunity belonged to her, but she gave it up so easily that a great opportunity now had slipped away. However, Futian himself didn't seem to feel anything, as if he didn't care about this inheritance at all. His eyes continued to focus on the heavenly scroll as the 7-star divine light fell and gathered on the heavenly scroll. The scroll opened, and changes occurred. The divine light shot towards the firmament, and in an instant, the entire starry sky lit up, and stars filled the sky. The shadow of the great emperor seemed to become clearer at this moment, gradually coming into focus as it materialized. An eternal aura came from the firmament, as a true might from heaven. Ziwei the Great. Standing under the starry sky, everyone could feel that supreme majesty, as if the great emperor's will had awakened. Has the mystery of Ziwei the Great been deciphered? Many thought secretly. Before, Many guessed that the 8th imperial star was the key to unlock the mystery of the starry sky. Now, it turned out that the 8th imperial star was not what they thought it was, but the secrets of the 8 great emperors beneath Ziwei the Great had been unlocked. Then, would the mystery of Ziwei the Great be revealed? At this time, inside Ziwei Imperial Palace, the starlight circulated, as the entire hall seemed to be changing. The palace lord of Ziwei Imperial Palace opened his eyes, and all the cultivators sitting inside the palace trembled. A voice was heard saying, "The inheritance of the 8 great emperors has been deciphered. The starry sky is lit up, and Ziwei the Great's figure is becoming ever clearer." Buzz. The starlight was flowing, but the cultivators inside the palace had disappeared. In the void, the voice of the palace lord of the Imperial Palace Master said, "How was it deciphered?" The 7 stars gathered and shined their light upon the heavenly scroll, causing the scroll to change. Someone responded. That scroll was the inheritance left by the 8th great emperor. Who did it? Another voice asked, but it was so elusive it was hard to tell where it came from. Outside, the cultivators who came here from the original realm changed the expression on their faces at this moment. They looked up at the sky and saw that the firmament seemed to be changing, and the whole world seemed to be changing as well. "What's going on?" someone whispered. Suddenly it turned into a world of starry sky. In it, they saw an infinite number of stars, as if they were in the segment, rather than just on a star. Ziwei Imperial Palace lit up just now. What's happening? Those top cultivators stared in the front. They felt an unusual aura. Many cultivators from Ziwei Imperial Palace seemed to have left, making their way somewhere else. From the Imperial Palace in the distance, cultivators were flickering their way here. Cultivators from the outside stared at the front, and someone murmured, "Has the inheritance of the great emperor been deciphered?" Even figures of great capacities couldn't help but become quite excited. Their emotions fluctuated greatly. What would happen if the inheritance of Ziwei the Great were to be revealed to this world? All the cultivators from the Imperial Palace seemed to have rushed there. "Should we go too?" someone asked. "Let's go." Those cultivators moved in the direction of Ziwei Imperial Palace. At times like this, they couldn't be concerned about so many other things. Chapter 2235, The Domineering Imperial Palace. In the starry sky world, Futian looked at the changes that took place in the sky. Just as he expected, the heavenly scroll in the hands of Ziwei the Great was the key. It was the key to unlock the mystery of the starry sky. Now, the key had been found. Perceiving a divine might that permeated from the sky, Futian had a feeling that the will of Ziwei the Great had been revived. Below the starry sky, a series of extremely domineering aura diffused out. Futian lowered his head to look below and saw the starlight shining. The palace lord of Ziwei Imperial Palace had personally led his cultivators to this place and arrived under the starry sky in just a moment's time, looking up at that divine shadow. Seeing this sight, those outside cultivators couldn't help but shuddered. But they also understood something. The truth was that Ziwei Imperial Palace was using them. For untold many years, Ziwei Imperial Palace had not found this key to decipher the mystery of the starry sky. Now, with the lifting of the ban on Ziwei the Great and Ziwei Segmentum's contact with the outside world, cultivators from the outside were allowed here, looking for the inheritance left by Ziwei Great. Therefore, they allowed these outside cultivators to enter this starry sky world, the personal cultivation ground of Ziwei the Great. As to why there was a restriction being placed on the cultivation level of top figures, it was probably because once these major figureheads got into the mix, even Ziwei Imperial Palace would have a hard time controlling the situation once the mystery of the starry sky had been deciphered. And as there were no giant-level figures among these cultivators here, the situation was much easier to control, and no one would pose a real challenge. After the cultivators of Ziwei Imperial Palace arrived, they stood there and watched the changes in the starry sky. The palace lord looked solemn and bowed to the figure of Ziwei the Great in the sky. Not just him, but everyone who came from Ziwei Imperial Palace did the same. This was the god they worshipped, the master of Ziwei Segmentum. The palace lord of Ziwei Imperial Palace surveyed the cultivators in the starry sky and saw the 8 who had inherited the divine glory of the great emperor. He said loudly, "In this starry cultivation ground of Ziwei the Great, it seems that everyone had some gains, even inheriting the power of the great emperor. It is a most satisfactory ending. We can handle everything here from here on out. Everyone, please return to your homes." The mystery of the starry sky seemed to have been resolved, and they didn't wish these outsiders to continue to linger here, so they started asking everyone to leave. Not all the outsiders came here either. Obviously, this was not a place they could easily get to, nor would Ziwei Imperial Palace allow them to open a passageway so easily to get to this starry space. Hearing these words from the palace lord of Ziwei Imperial Palace, many had a strange expression. Indeed, Ziwei Imperial Palace was not some benevolent host. They had used them to solve the mystery of the starry sky, and now they wanted to chase them away so that they could have this starry sky world to themselves. They were skilled enough in this type of double-cross. However, none of them moved, especially the 8 who were still inheriting the divine powers. How could they give up and leave? Obviously, they were unwilling to. The same was true for other cultivators. After having finally seen the changes in the starry sky, it was possible that the inheritance of Ziwei the Great would descend, and everyone was anticipating it. How could they possibly want to leave now, at this point? No one wanted to leave. It was the same for Yi Futian. Clearly, he understood everything as well. It could be said that this mystery was solved almost entirely by him. Now, were they expelling him? Cultivators of Ziwei Imperial Palace walked forward, as the palace lord holding the scepter from which strands of domineering aura diffused. More than that, the cultivators behind him were also releasing the coercion of the great path. In a moment, under this starry sky, all the cultivators felt an extremely powerful sense of oppression. Some wanted to move, but under the pressure of the great path, even their breathing had hastened. Was this to expel all the cultivators immediately? Ziwei Imperial Palace seemed truly determined. "Everyone, the palace lord has already allowed you to cultivate here for many days. Now, many have received the opportunities of the great path, even inherited the power of the great emperor. It is now time to leave. Don't be greedy," a cultivator from Ziwei Imperial Palace said loudly. "Ziwei Imperial Palace asked us to be here. Now that the mystery of the starry sky is unlocked, you want to take everything we have created. It's rather unreasonable," said a cultivator who was bathing in the divine light and who had inherited the power of the great emperor. The divine light upon him was as frightening as his aura was breathtaking. He did not seem to be affected at all by the oppression. When everyone looked there, they remembered that they had the power of the imperial star at their disposal, and a few of them were already in the 8th realm themselves. Might they have a chance to compete with the cultivators of Ziwei Imperial Palace? The people from Ziwei Imperial Palace looked at the cultivator who spoke up. They knew very well that those who had inherited the power of the imperial star could use its power of the great path in battle, hence, their audacity in a direct challenge. These people themselves were extraordinary genius talents from the outside world. As those who stood at the peak, they had nothing to fear and feared nothing. "Everything you have created?" The palace lord of Ziwei Imperial Palace glanced at the speaker. His expression was tranquil, but his deep-set eyes revealed his indifference. "This is the Ziwei segmentum here, and you came through the passage of Ziwei Imperial Palace. I am the one who gave you the opportunity, and now you think this place belongs to your..." The starry sky was full of oppression, and both sides were insistent in their differing opinions. Of course, there was no reasoning to be had in the first place. "Go now. I don't want to use my power on you." The palace lord of Ziwei Imperial Palace stood there in the sky with a scepter in hand. Starlight circulated, filled with the terrifying power of the great path. Even those cultivators who had been baptized by the imperial star felt a great coercion. None of the 7 made a response to the palace lord. Their expressions were grave as the aura of the great path circulated upon their bodies. Aided by the power of the imperial star, rays of terrible light beams diffused out. They had not yet completed the inheritance, so even if the palace lord tried to stop them right now to rob them of their fruits, he would not be able to accomplish it. None of them would hesitate to fight. Among these 7, a few of them were supreme existence in the 8th realm. With the help of the Imperial Star's power, even when they faced giants at the peak of Renhuang, they would not retreat, for they were sure they would be able to contend with them. They could perceive their own strength at this moment. But they were not quite sure about taking on the Palace Lord of Ziwei Imperial Palace. In their estimation, this master of Ziwei Segmentum may have already passed the second divine tribulation of the Great Path, which made him an absolutely terrifying existence. Anyone at this level, there was no certainty that he could be defeated even aided by the power of the Imperial Star. Therefore, they waited with great caution. Bathed in the divine glory of the Imperial Star, they were filled up with great prowess, as if they were ready for the oncoming battle. In the sky above, Yi Futian merely cast a glance at the situation below before turning his attention back to the changes in the starry sky. He then drifted in a certain direction. Stop him. It was he who unlocked the secrets of the heavenly scroll. A voice came from among the cultivators of Ziwei Imperial Palace. Suddenly, the Palace Lord turned his eyes toward Yi Futian as he lifted the scepter in his hand. He pointed in the direction where Yi Futian was in the sky and said, "Stop." However, at the moment the scepter was raised, a godlike phantom appeared in another direction. The ancient god held a massive sky hammer, blasting in the direction of the Palace Lord of Ziwei Imperial Palace. From top to bottom in the firmament, a terrifying divine light destroyed everything, smashing directly across the distance. The starry sky was shocked by this frightening force. However, the Palace Lord of Ziwei Imperial Palace was still standing firmly in place, raising the scepter in his hand. Suddenly a starlight screen appeared all around him as if he was guarded by the stars, which blocked the area around them. Boom! The sky hammer fell, cracking the starlight screen, but did not beak it. Its defense power was horrifying to imagine. Clearly, Blind Tai also felt the terrible defense power of this star, and the cultivators in the starry sky felt amazed. It was so powerful. They had detected how terrifying the attack was, but they couldn't break through the defenses. How frightening was the strength of someone who had survived 2 major divine tribulations. The great path field of the surrounding stars was probably almost in an invincible state. Furthermore, even though cracks had appeared on that terrifying star light screen, it was being repaired rapidly. In a short moment, it was as good and perfect as it was before. The Palace Lord of Ziwei Imperial Palace drifted higher into the sky. Suddenly, that radiant star light screen went up along with him as well. Probably won't be able to stop him, thought the cultivators who were in the starry sky. They looked in the direction Yi Futian was and saw him moving in the void with great speed toward the place where the 7 stars had converged. It was also the place of the heavenly scroll. This sight caused the hearts of all the cultivators to beat wildly, and many stepped out as well and headed straight in the same direction. They believed in Yi Futian. Evidently, underneath this starry sky, the powerhouses all felt that what Yi Futian did was correct, and he had the chance to inherit Great Emperor Ziwei's power. After all, everything that happened today was brought about by Yi Futian himself. Hence, when they saw Yi Futian striding forward, the powerhouses from everywhere followed despite their previous goal of exploring the secrets of this starry dimension and seeking the power of Great Emperor Ziwei's inheritance. But now, the secrets of the starry dimension might have been deciphered, and Great Emperor Ziwei's inheritance might have already surfaced. Naturally, they would not remain at such close terms. If there really were an inheritance, they would inevitably fight for it. Many eyes were staring at Yi Futian. Seeing that Yi Futian was heading towards the heavenly scroll, amassed of the 7 stars, the rest of the powerhouses rushed straight over with great haste. However, as Yi Futian had departed in advance, he would still be the fastest person to arrive. At this moment, a horrifying streak of dark divine light broke through the void. A ginormous dark hand that could see no edge appeared in the starry sky and directly smashed towards Yi Futian's body to halt him. At the same time, several attacks appeared from other directions and whooshed towards Yi Futian simultaneously to stop him from becoming the first person to arrive. Yi Futian's gnosis of this starry dimension was too profound. They were worried that he would find Great Emperor Ziwei's inheritance immediately. Should that happen, It would be too late for them. Clang! But at this moment, a sonorous sound of a zither emerged. It was brimming with energy. An invisible rhythm was vibrating while it swept across the starry dimension. The energy of this sound ripple was a wisp of blooming diving light that descended from the imperial star from above the skies. It flitted around Yi Futian's body, and within the fraction of a second, the energy of the attacks that were coming at him vanished into ashes. Every attack was decimated. Many glanced in one direction, only to see Luo Su bathed in divine light. She, too, looked at them with her alluring eyes. It was she who destroyed all the attacks that were coming at Yi Futian. Go! Luo Su opened her mouth and said. Yi Futian nodded and quickened his pace. Some looked at Luo Su with cold eyes. It seemed as if she was returning a favor to Yi Futian. Previously, Yi Futian allowed her to inherit an imperial star and acquire the inheritance of a great emperor. Now, she was not coveting for the inheritance of great Emperor Ziwei. She was already satisfied with complete inheritance over one great emperor's power. Her action was undoubtedly wise. Even if Luo Su wanted the inheritance of great Emperor Ziwei, her body would most likely be unable to take it. Besides, with her previous encounter with Yi Futian, they have established friendship among themselves. If she could assist Yi Futian in obtaining the inheritance of great Emperor Ziwei, it naturally would not be a bad thing for her. In the future, she would have an extra friend that was super powerful at the outer violet heaven. At another location, a massive war had erupted likewise. The light of stars emerged at the space around the place lord of Ziwei Imperial Palace like a boundless nebula marching towards the high clouds. Blind Tai attacked him once again but was still unable to break him. He was only able to stall his upward motion. Stop them, Blind Tai said. However, the few cultivators chose to watch and do nothing this time. It seemed that Yi Futian was after great Emperor Ziwei's inheritance, and for that, the aces of Ziwei Imperial Palace were all staring at him. Coincidentally, while Yi Futian had all of the Ziwei Imperial Palace's attention, they would have more time to draw upon the power of the inheritance. With Luo Su helping Yi Futian, the only ones who could attack on their side were Blind Tai and Jiyu Dongliu. Above the sky, an even more stalwart figure, who seemed matchless, appeared. An anomaly emerged in the sky. It seemed like a true god dancing with a hammer. With the light of the imperial star, the hammer plummeted and blasted toward the celestial body. In addition, a magnificent picture of 1,000 demons appeared in the void. Like a terrifying divine matrix, there were infinite demon gods in it. The divine light from the imperial star fell on it, and thousands of demons charged towards that direction. The eyes of the palace lord of Ziwei Imperial Palace were still indifferent. He was already extremely displeased about being hindered, but the opponent was still thinking about snatching the power of great Emperor Ziwei underneath his eyelids. He lifted the scepter in his hand and pointed it towards the sky. The veil of starlight constantly fluctuated and mystically transformed into the shape of a sword that resembled the sword of stars. Bzzz. A streak of terrifying divine light shook the world. The starry divine sword emitted an unmatched divine light of annihilation and pierced through the starry sky. The thousands of demons were shredded into pieces. Jiyu Dongliu had a weak cultivation base after all. Even with the power of the imperial star, it was still impossible for him to stop the palace lord of Ziwei Imperial Palace. The divine light collided with the godly figure in the air. The sword of stars could overrun all fortifications, but it shattered into nothingness after it made a crack on the divine hammer. The divine light pierced through the anomaly and shattered all existence. The palace lord of Ziwei Imperial Palace strode forward across the void and paced towards the upper sky. The power that Blind Tai could borrow from the imperial star was limited, and the palace lord of Ziwei Imperial Palace was a genuine powerhouse. Even across the entire divine prefecture, only a very few could ever stand up against him. But while they were fighting, Yi Futian already arrived at where he was heading, above the heavenly scroll where the 7 stars were gathered. An infinite light beam fell on his body and instant penetrated his body. Above the starry sky, starlight that could see no end showered down on his body. At this very moment, Yi Futian could only feel as if his body was being torn apart, which sensation originated from the depths of his very soul. At last, Futian was still the first to arrive. Above the sky, stars were shining, and God's might descended. The body of great Emperor Ziwei brimmed with an unrivaled authority of heaven. It was as if it was revived. The pressure was so immense that no cultivator was spared from the feeling of suffocation. Luo Su ceased his attack after Futian arrived at his position. Subsequently, the others arrived one after another. Likewise, they did not attack Futian. After all, he had already reached the final destination, and there was no point in attacking anymore. When they came into Futian's domain, they were also bathed in the horrifying divine light of stars. Many people felt extreme pain that was somewhat unbearable. What kind of power is this? It seemed that there was no advantage in being the first to arrive. They could still come to this place. But what about after they arrive? What would happen? Nobody knew what was going to happen next. The powerhouses of Ziwei Imperial Palace arrived as well. The palace lord looked up at the sky. He could only feel his body trembling as an urge to grovel on his knees and worship emerged. Because his cultivation base was powerful enough, the power he could perceive was also more intense. At this moment, it felt for him as if he had witnessed the return of Great Emperor Ziwei, and the Great Emperor was just right above the starry sky looking at him. Great Emperor! The palace lord of Ziwei Imperial Palace bowed down and worshipped him. The rest of the other cultivators did the same with solemn expressions. Was the will of the Great Emperor resurrected? You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,